reports and things coming up first. So I'll call to order the regular Board of Supervisors meeting for Ferguson Township, Monday, November 2nd, 2020. I'll ask Dave to give the normal introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening for the November 2nd regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. This meeting's been advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a virtual meeting conducted using the Zoom telemeeting platform. Additionally, the township's conference bridge has been made available for those who cannot participate in the webinar format. This can be accessed by calling 814-238-4651 and entering extension 3799 when prompted. If you're joining the Zoom meeting tonight as a member of the public or as an agent to speak on behalf of an agenda item, if you could use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to enter your name and municipality of residence, and if applicable, the topic you wish to speak on, that will be helpful for the purposes of recording the information for the minutes. Prior to beginning the meeting, just a couple of procedural items to briefly cover. This has been structured as a webinar format, so any attendees that are on the call will not be permitted to speak unless acknowledged by the chairman and enabled by the host. I'll be the host this evening. This has been formatted accordingly to account for anybody who may be here to speak on behalf of an agenda item so that we can properly control the cadence of the meeting. So I will provide instruction on how the public can participate at the appropriate time. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when either motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes can accurately reflect the action taken. And then lastly, before we begin, I will take a roll call of the Board of Supervisors to ensure that all members can hear and interact by using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate you're here when your name is called. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Danini.
Here.
Mr. Mitra.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Start by unmuting. Before we begin the other part, the rest of the meeting, I need to announce that the board did have 2 executive sessions since our last meeting. On October 19th, we had an executive session on matters of personnel and litigation. And on October 27th, we had an executive session on personnel matters. Next item is citizens' input for anything that is not on the agenda. If anyone cares to address the board, if you could indicate to the manager, he would recognize you.
And you can either indicate if you're interested in speaking under citizens' input by using the chat feature or by raising your hand, and I'll keep an eye on that under attendees, and if you do, I can enable you to speak.
Okay, if we have none.
I don't see any.
We'll move to the approval of minutes for October 19th, 2020, Board of Supervisors regular meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Lisa, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Next, under special reports, we have a COVID-19 response report from the manager.
Thank you and good evening. Just have a few local and regional updates to provide with my report tonight. If there's any regional updates, you can find more detail by visiting the Center Region Ready Facebook page or the COG website at crcog.net. Firstly, as the board is aware, administration offices were closed last week to the public in response to safety protocol following one of my staff testing positive for COVID-19. I am happy to report that the offices have been reopened beginning today from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They'll remain open for that time from Monday through Friday, and staff is working on site again. I'm even happier to report that the staff person who tested positive is recovering well, and there have been no further positive tests or concerns on staff. Second, with the election day tomorrow, residents who vote at the municipal building are asked to observe the signage and guidelines in place at the polling station so that we can ensure a safe experience and avoid conflicts with traffic and township operations. Staff has been given the option to work remotely if they're able to in order to reduce the demand on parking at the municipal building. And additionally, the CATA Executive Director, Luana Oliva, has graciously offered the use of additional parking spaces near the township building to accommodate staff needs for the day. Next, this past weekend was a particularly concerning weekend for the police department as Penn State football hosted Ohio State at home. This, coupled with trick-or-treating activities on Sunday evening, made for a very challenging weekend. Aside from a few incidents, the weekend went generally well, and I would like to express my appreciation to the officers who worked over the weekend patrolling to keep our community safe. Regionally, the only substantial update is that trick-or-treating was rescheduled from last Thursday to yesterday evening for all municipalities in the Center region except for Half Moon Township. This was done primarily in response to the bad weather forecasted for last Thursday, but as well as the home football weekend scheduled for Saturday. So when Penn State plays at home the same evening as Halloween, as was the case this year, typically the region has rescheduled trick-or-treat to avoid any conflicts with the game. Beginning this year, the General Forum set an alternative date in the event of inclement weather, and the decision was made to opt for the rain date by the chiefs of police, the municipal managers, and the regional emergency management coordinator. I want to thank everyone for your understanding and your willingness to accommodate the revised schedule. As always, I will conclude my report by expressing my appreciation to the residents and business owners in the township for your patience and understanding as we continue to recover from this unprecedented crisis. With that, I'll conclude my report unless there's any questions from the board or public.
Does anyone have any questions for Dave? Lisa?
No questions. I just want to say thank you for the update on the office staff, and that's great to hear. And I appreciate everybody working through that. I'm sure that was challenging. And then I wanted to say to Chief Albright that I thought that the rain date, and to you as well, I thought the rain date scheduling for trick-or-treating went well. Everything else aside, we were kind of experimenting with that. And so I thought that went smoothly. I got notifications from multiple sources about the change of date. And I'm sure most parents did too. So hopefully, neighbors got that word out in time, but it seemed like they did. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the State College Borough Water Authority report. I do not see our liaison, Ford Stryker, on the list of attendees.
Yeah, Mr. Stryker contacted me early this afternoon and told me essentially that he had nothing to update the board on. If there's any questions or comments that the board would like to relay to Mr. Stryker to convey to the State College Borough Water Authority board, I can take them down and pass them along to him. But he essentially said he had nothing to report.
Okay, thanks. Next item is Penn State University West Campus Development Update. Neil Sullivan, the university planner, is here for that.
Yes, and I'll bring Mr. Sullivan in to speak. And Neil, if you have a presentation or anything, I can try to enable you to, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, I do have something to share. I don't see a share button, unfortunately.
So Dave, you're muted.
Thank you. Most likely because I need to promote you. One moment while I finalize your promotion.
So the other option could be the share screen. Just click on the right and say multiple.
True.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm here.
Did that work?
Yep, this should work. Let me find the share button. Okay, great. Okay, well, hey, thank you for allowing me to join you tonight, and I'm really excited to share with you the College of Engineering Master Plan. It primarily comprises the land that we call the West Campus, but as you'll see, part of the College of Engineering is going to reconceive areas of core campus as well. Let me just, hold on. There we go. Okay, so this master plan really wanted to look at the two areas of campus. It's the West Campus, as I just mentioned, and the core campus right by the old main lawn, which is historically the area of campus where the College of Engineering has always been. It currently has the Hammond and SACKETT buildings as well as the engineering units. And the main purpose of the plan was to account for all the space where the college is occupying on campus, consolidate and reorganize the space so that we could find more efficient ways for them to work together and find strategic alignments between the different departments of the college, and as well as find opportunities for new building sites as we needed to replace the existing facilities, and there are new pedagogies of learning and instruction and collaborating. Oh, sorry about that. We also really wanted to take this opportunity to reconceive what the West Campus could be. We feel like it's sort of been, I don't want to say forgotten, but it's been, it doesn't have the same level of care, and the outdoor space doesn't have the same level of vibrancy that the core campus currently has. And so if we were to move the College of Engineering to the West Campus, then it was really an opportunity to create and elevate the outdoor spaces to the same level and let it feel as part of the core campus rather than apart from it. We also really wanted to bolster the West Campus and the core campus, primarily the Westgate building. That really is the safest way that people and bikes can cross Atherton Street to connect from one side to the other. And so the design of the West Campus and and how we were to lay out the pathways really needed to support that connection between the two sides. So before we began with the, designing what the new master plan would look like, we had to account for all the spaces for the College of Engineering. And what this diagram really shows is that 2/3 of the college's space is on the West Campus and on the core campus, right where Hammond and SACKETT currently is. But it's also noting that another 1/3 of the college's space is on the far east side of the university, right by the ICA Center and up by the agricultural area beyond the Arboretum in areas of that point. So there was a notion that we could bring these spaces closer together, consolidate, and really try to find efficiencies in how the college is laid out across the campus. There's also another idea that we were exploring in this master plan, and it's the idea of whether this wanted to be a core-centric center or thematic interdisciplinary center. Typically with core research centers, that's how the College of Engineering has been laid out in the past. And it's based on the notion that the core resources are going to be singularly located in buildings or rooms, and that everyone that wanted to use those resources would have to go to that one location. What we wanted to do was to explore the idea of thematic interdisciplinary centers so that you could have interdisciplinary research groups that would be co-located, and you'd have different departments coming together within different buildings, and they would use shared research facilities and shared research techniques. And we thought that this could be more adaptable over time. And so as research changes, the buildings were to be designed to be more flexible so that you wouldn't have these legacy instruments in one location, rather than, you know, it would be able to be moved around depending on what the current needs were. And so at the end of the space needs studies, we found that we could indeed move a lot of the college spaces closer to where core campus was in the West Campus, which really was accomplishing the goal that we were setting out to do. And so now what I can do is talk more specifically about how the master plan is going to be brought forth in the West Campus and in the core campus. And then try to give you an idea of timeline and phasing of how this could actually be accomplished. So this is showing what we're calling a phase 1 and phase 1A and phase 1B of the West Campus. You'll see that there is a proposed west parking deck, and that's currently under construction, soon to be open. We think we're aiming for April of next year. We also have the West 2 building, which is going to be attached to the side of the west deck so that it frames a new quad for the College of Engineering. And then we also are planning on building the West 1 building. And that's going to be situated behind EES and the rec fields. And it's also going to have sort of what we were initially calling a mini hub, but it's not going to be a hub for student affairs, but rather it's going to be a student activity space. And we're going to have things like the College of Engineering library in there, a lot of breakout study spaces. And we're also going to have some food services in this building. And, you know, this was made aware of us that really there's no place to eat on the West Campus. And if we're going to be asking a lot of students to come over here, then they really need to find, they really need to have places to meet their daily needs while they're over here, rather than having to walk across Westgate building to go back and forth. The West 3 building is also shown on this plan, just to show how it would fit in along the West 1. Currently, there is no timeline for West 3, but the idea is that it would serve as, probably would be for the College of Engineering, and it really sits on the edge of the West Campus along Atherton Street, and really could be a landmark building or a focal point. So when we do design this building, you know, we would have to consider, you know, how can it greet visitors to the West Campus, and how can it represent Penn State as people drive up and down Atherton Street. And then here's a site plan of the West Campus. And so if you can see a Westgate building that crosses Atherton and empties out onto a Westgate Plaza, which then is kitty corner to the quad. And so we really wanted to create a lot of different types of spaces. You know, the more bucolic settings of the West Quad with lots of shady trees, similar to what we have on the core campus. And then the West Plaza would be more of a place for activity and vibrancy. As you know, the food service part of the West 1 building, you could spill out and eat outside and watch people walking by. We also really wanted to take into account how people would walk from the parking garage throughout the West Campus and into core campus. And it was important to us that when people park their car at the West Campus, that they can get directly into the quad and get as quickly as possible into Westgate. And so here I'm showing a spot where the arrow terminates at this building. We're creating a main stair tower here in this location. And what we hope to do someday, there's a one-story classroom building that sits on the EES campus. We're hoping that someday that this piece will be removed. And so that when you are leaving the parking garage, you literally have a straight shot from the garage into the Westgate building to eliminate the walking distance as much as possible. We also are creating a green space south of the West Garage between the chiller plant and the garage. And we're going to be maintaining the bike connection that currently exists. And we're going to be leading people from the bike trail on the by White Horse Apartments and the golf course, going through the quad and leading you up so you can ride your bike over Westgate building into the core campus. And here's an artist's rendering of what the West Campus could look like in the near future. So we're sort of hovering in midair above the Westgate building, looking directly at the garage. Here's the stair tower that I mentioned, and it's going to be all glass. And the idea is that it can be lit up at night and serve as a beacon so that you can easily find it. The West 2 building, this was just approved by the Board of Trustees a few months ago, and we're actually starting construction this month in October. And so this building is going to have an all glass facade and have a lot of wood elements as well. This building is going to have a lot of engineering design studios, and we envision that this building is going to have a lot of 24/7 activity. And so this facade can really help light up this quad and really help bring a lot of activity and excitement to this area. And also, because this building might be used later into the evening, we really wanted to make sure that it was tucked in the middle of the campus so that we can control light spread from our property onto adjoining neighborhoods. And then also in the front on the right-hand side is the West 1 building. This one's still being designed. We hope to break ground sometime in the spring. And so the front will be mostly glass, and this will have the library, student breakout spaces. The upper floors are going to have general purpose classrooms. And so this will be sort of a resource for the entire university. And then the back half of this building, this is where you're going to have the College of Engineering labs and the instructor offices. And here's another vision of what the West 1 building will look like as you're leaving the Westgate building and you're going to be facing the plaza. Now, I talked a lot about the trying to reinforce the connection across the Westgate building, and that really is our preferred method of crossing Atherton. However, we do realize that there is an at-grade crossing on Atherton Street that currently exists. There's currently a pedestrian refuge island there. And so we're not going to take this away. We realize that this does serve an important purpose from connecting the engineering core campus down to the Leonard building and the Research West building. And so what we're going to try to do is try to reinforce this by making it more green and park-like. And then we will in the future continue to work with PennDOT and the borough to see if there's additional safety measures that we can employ along Atherton Street. We just recently reduced the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. And as I mentioned, there is a pedestrian refuge island. And so those two things go a long way for protecting pedestrians as they cross. But as new technologies develop, we'll certainly find ways that we can further increase safety.
So
can
I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So yeah, my office is in Westgate, right over Atherton. And when I look out, there is always people walking across when it is green. And it's just, you know, an accident waiting to happen. And so, you know, ideally, from the safety point of view, if this was closed down with sort of like a fence on and so on, and we did not have a crossing, that would be the safest. But also, I mean, people are lazy. Even if we don't have a crossing, I don't know if people would be crossing and things like that. Have you guys observed what goes on there and somebody is looking into these issues?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly observe it all the time. And, you know, what we're trying to do is iterative steps to help improve safety. Like I mentioned, reducing the speed limit to 25 miles an hour, I think can go a very long way to help slow traffic down. I drive up and down Atherton Street all the time, and I literally set my cruise control to 27 miles an hour, and I am getting past all the time. Cars are just tearing up, and especially when you're going downhill. So I think enforcement is really one of the best methods that we could have to change people's behavior. Unfortunately, it's a PennDOT street. It's designed to PennDOT standards. It's wide. And in my personal opinion, and actually professional opinion, wide streets encourage speeding. So even if we do post the speed limit to be 25, people feel that they can go faster because the street is wider. There are other methods that we've talked about very casually, such as, could you do a mid-block stoplight? Or could you do a pedestrian activated yellow blinking light to alert drivers that pedestrians are in the area? All of these things we'd have to work very closely with PennDOT on. We haven't gone forward with those steps yet. We are just trying to see, could posting a slower speed limit be enough? So, these things take time. I don't know if we have the appetite to put a fence up in the middle of Atherton Street, because what we do find, people are like water, and they would just walk a little bit further up or a little bit further down, and then they would cross at a non-crosswalk area, which could be even more unsafe.
Yeah, so then the other thing is, can this light be synced with the at least the light where, just before, which is the one that people are getting into the Westgate parking lot?
Yeah, I don't know if it's currently synced or not. It's something I could look into or bring up.
All right, thank you.
Traffic engineers, but I think that would make a lot of sense if it's not already done so. Okay, so with Core Campus, when the two new engineering buildings are built on West Campus, the Hammond and Sackett buildings and the engineering units will be empty. And when they're empty, they can be removed. And so when they are removed, we're envisioning two new buildings along College Avenue, as well as a significant renovation to the Sackett building. This is really far down the line, and we don't have a clear idea of what is going to occupy these buildings. We do think, because historically this has been the site for engineering for Penn State since the inception of the program, that these buildings will remain engineering buildings. But we will just have to look at what the university needs are at the time. One thing I can say is the master plan is calling for a plaza along College Avenue. As you know, Hammond building is 800 feet long. It's a very long barrier of a building that separates the campus from the street. We're going to mandate some sort of plaza or opening and build two buildings rather than one long building. And the idea is that we can create a vertical transition between the old President's House and the Alumni Gardens going down to College Avenue. So here's a plan of what I just showed you from the perspective. So we have the Alumni Garden, the President's House up here. We will have an engineering quad here. It's going to be required for stormwater. So, because of the flooding that occurs along College Avenue, we have to build an underground stormwater vault up here, and then it can release stormwater slowly over time. So between the engineering quad and the engineering plaza, there could be between a 10 and 20 foot difference. And so we'll have to hire a very good designer to help us come up with a design. What does that height difference look like? And then can we create a plaza that is a good asset, not only for the university, but for the community as well. One thing that we do want to pay attention to is the idea of this campus edge along College Avenue. This is a really good opportunity to create buildings that have active ground floor uses that can also be an asset to the borough and to the community. So we would be envisioning a lot of glass on the ground floor, a retail-like experience, so that we aren't creating a barrier between College Avenue and the university, but more of a engagement opportunity. these buildings, you know, it might be 10 years or so before these buildings are ever designed. But, you know, this is the direction that we will be giving the architect at the time. One interesting thing with SACKETT is, you know, you have the old historic building that was designed and built in the 1930s. And then you have currently the 1950s wings on either side. What we didn't realize at the time, and we discovered during this master plan, is the original architect designed 2 wings to go on SACKETT that were never built. And so it's our intention that we're going to use the initial design that was created in the 1930s and then commission an architect to design the wings to recreate the original notion. And so this is essentially, you know, the scale and the size of the 2 wings. And that we thought that it would be really, really interesting to help bring this building back to its original form and original intention, since it does line Old Main Lawn and really could help complete the historic core of this part of campus. And then here's like a very early notional view of what the 2 new engineering buildings might look like along College Avenue. So the buildings are on the left-hand side. So the intention is showing, you know, some glass. You know, we want this porosity. We want these buildings to be more engaging visually. We're also showing, you know, an open plaza area between the 2 buildings. You know, we have some gorgeous old elm trees along College Avenue, so we'd have to work very hard to make sure that they're preserved and protected. And then last, I can talk about, you know, timeline and phasing of how all this can come to fruition. So here's a bird's eye aerial of what we have today. So I think the most identifiable feature here is Westgate Building crossing Atherton. We also have the parking lots behind White Horse Drive, a parking lot here on West Campus with the engineering quad. We also have the core engineering buildings. So if you can see my mouse, I have SACKETT, the SACKETT building here. We have Hammond, this long 800-foot long building, and then the engineering units behind Hammond. So in the first phase, and this is under the current capital plan that is going to go between now and 2023. We are going, or have begun, starting to build the West Campus parking garage. Like I said, it's going to open in April or May 2021. Sorry, that's a typo. The West 2 building is going to open. It's going to start construction this month and open hopefully in fall 2022. And then the West 1 building will open in spring 2024. When these buildings are open, the idea is that the engineering units in SACKETT and parts of Hammond are going to move over to these new buildings. And then the rest of SACKETT, while this begins renovation, they're going to have to move to Hammond building initially so that we can empty this building. This building will be completely renovated to bring it up to modern standards. And so when SACKETT is finished, then we can empty out Hammond and then finally demolish Hammond. And that won't be until the summer of 2026. However, the funding is already in place. And so that money is going to be in a lockbox, so to speak. And so that the demolition of Hammond is completely funded right now. We just have to wait for the timeline to play itself out. In the next capital plan will start in 2023. That's probably when we're going to look at these 2 new buildings along College Avenue. This is a very important part of campus. We realize, you know, it's a great opportunity to help link the community and the university together. And so I think it's going to be important to us to come up with a design and build these buildings as soon as possible. So we don't have an exact timeline yet, but you know, we do think they're going to be funded in the next capital cycle. West 3 is also initially thought it could be funded in the next capital cycle. You know, now we have the reality of COVID and there's a lot of financial constraints on the university. We really don't know how things are going to be playing out. This was our intention a year ago, and we hope that we can get this done. We'll just have to see how things really play out. Looking further afield to at the 3 capital cycles from now, we're going to look at rebuilding Research West. We're going to be looking at the buildings along Railroad Avenue, and then also the electrical engineering building that's by the obelisk. Again, the further we go out, the more murky things look, but right now that's how we see things playing out. And that is the engineering master plan. Do you have any questions?
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Neil? Just sort of speak up if so, because I can't see everybody yet, so.
Steve, it's Laura.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil, for your presentation and your time. I was wondering, and as you might expect, I'm particularly interested in the plans for the Ferguson portion of your West Campus area. I'm wondering if you could, on this screen that you have up right now, could you point to where Buckout Street is on this drawing?
Buckout Street is not on this drawing. Let me see if it's on another drawing. Let me just flip through the deck. If not, we can pull up an aerial. Okay, it's not here. If you give me a second, I'll pull up an aerial and we can point to where Buckout Street is.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure, no problem. I'm going to just pull up a Google map.
Great, thank you.
Computer is a little laggy.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Can you see, did the screen change at all?
No.
All right, let me change my my share settings so that I can share my desktop but not specifically the presentation. Okay, so give me one more minute. Just when you're giving a presentation, that's when your computer decides not to play.
And if it's difficult for you, we could just have a discussion about it.
Well, why don't you ask your question and then I'll see if I can pull it up.
Sure. Oh, looks like Dave.
Yeah,
has it
I'll
taken
jump on
care
here. So
of there.
Buckout is right here, West College right here, and basically the West Campus that Neil's referencing starts right around here.
Right. Okay, so I guess I may have a few questions here.
All right.
Currently, there's a significant amount of construction activity that's taking place on the former house lot, which is adjacent to Buckout Street.
Yeah.
And then, as I understand, behind that, a fair amount of stormwater basin construction, some of which is in Ferguson Township and some of which is in the borough.
Yep.
I guess I'm wondering what the plan is to fill in that Ferguson area in front of some of those basins, like the Houts lot. And as I understand it, the university owns some of those buildings that look condemnable then across the road there. I guess I kind of thought that this West Campus plan would include those properties. Looks like you go pretty far out into 2028 then, and there's no plan at all to do anything with those properties. Am I understanding correctly, Neil?
You are. So the plan I presented to you was for the College of Engineering. And so there is no plan for the College of Engineering to occupy the Houts property. So I think your question is what's going to become of the Houts property?
And adjacent areas that that picture of College Ave you had was very nice. That was in front of the Hammond building in the future.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see what the vision is for our Ferguson portion of College Ave. So whoever is going to be occupying it, do you have any ideas or time frame or anything on that?
So I don't, unfortunately. We have studied the Houts property, in the past. We envision it to be an opportunity for future educational space, research space, office space. It also could be a mixed use component to it. But right now, we feel that there's just we would either have to bring in a partner, a private developer partner to help us with it. And we just feel that the time's not right for that to really be, to happen. Now, it's currently being used down space for the parking garage. And from what I understand is we have an agreement with the borough to use it until the completion of the parking deck. And then once the parking deck is finished, we no longer can use the Houts property for that purpose.
Right. Yes, Ferguson is also not interested in that residential area being used any longer as a very disruptive kind of a use like that. So we're supportive of the borough in that. I guess I would say that it is concerning to me that there has been so much property acquisition with no plan or timeline in mind, because as you know, that kind of deterioration can greatly affect a neighborhood. And so I would implore you through your chain of command to please try to be more sensitive to our residents' needs who live in close proximity to some of those very deteriorating properties. Thank you. Then I have one other comment. In the past, I've gone to design review board in the borough and have mentioned this. There is and I've mentioned it to developers in our township as well. There is a trend to do glass-faced buildings. I'm not sure if you're doing the kind that are as or more energy efficient than regular walls. But my concern is actually ecological in a different way. But you know, when you do those glass buildings, you really increase bird strike deaths. And I guess I would request that you would consider there is glass that you can use that does not increase bird strike deaths. And with the amount of glass you all are considering there, I would just comment that I think that it would be ecologically responsible and socially beneficial for you to consider that. It's never pleasant to walk down the pathway and see dead bird after dead bird because they've flown into the building thinking it was air. So I understand they're very attractive buildings to some, but I guess I would just make that request.
So I hear you loud and clear. Two things. One is we are only restricted to doing 40% of our building facade glass, no matter what we do. So what we're doing is certain parts of the building will have significantly less than 40% so that we can be more impactful in other areas such as entrances or ground floors. So those areas would be more than 40%. We have been asked in the past by others to look at bird safe glass. I think in the past year or so, we've looked very heavily at it. We've brought in samples. We've talked to manufacturers. It's something we continue to look at. It's not my area of expertise. I'm not the university architect. I sit next to them and I hear their conversations. From what I understand is the science isn't completely settled on the best way to design glass to be bird safe. They have different ways to do it because birds can view light at a different spectrum than we can. And so it's like when you put on sunglasses a certain way and you look at windows, you can actually see patterns in the glass that you couldn't see without your sunglasses. And so we've tried those sorts of samples. I don't know if the science is in, to use a well-worn phrase, but it is something that we do consider to look into.
Thank you.
Hi, Neil. It's Patty Stevens. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the bus station staying there on Atherton Street? And what's being done in the lots next to it, like between the bus station and College Avenue?
Okay, so the existing bus station is remaining. Let me, and then the lots next to the station. Let me just make sure we're talking about the same thing. I'll pull up.
I think there used to be a rental center there. It's all boarded up now.
Oh, you mean along Atherton Street?
Rainbow Music.
The Rainbow Music. Okay, yes. So those buildings, we call them the Smith properties. They are currently boarded up. The brick building that was where the antique store was, the upper floors were structurally unsound and they were not allowed to have people up there. So that becomes a health and safety risk. And so we, similarly to Hout's property, we do have a vision for these properties. We're waiting for the right partner. We're waiting for the right time, but we felt that that building did have to come down for health and safety reasons. The Rainbow Music building will be temporarily housing a construction office for the general contractor who will be developing the West 2 and the West 1 buildings.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Neil?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. This is Lisa.
Sure, Lisa.
Thanks, Neil. That was a great presentation. I appreciate you bringing it here. Just a couple of additional questions. Can you tell us about the traffic patterns around the parking deck? Where you see
Sure.
cars in and out in relation to Atherton and College?
Okay, I'll do my best. As you know, there's only one entrance in and out of the garage along White Horse Drive that will empty out onto Atherton. A traffic impact study was performed and it was accepted by the borough engineer as well as PennDOT, where we have agreed to do some road improvements and where we would be building turning lanes as well as doing traffic signal optimization up along Atherton Street. And so do you have a specific question about the traffic patterns?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm, that everything will be coming off of Atherton.
Correct. Yes. So that's the plan.
Okay. And then I noticed what you had said about the speed being reduced to 25 on Atherton. Was that in relation to this project? It goes above Park Avenue, even the 25.
No, that was done. If memory it was done in the summer of 2018, long before, right before we started this project. I think it was an independent act taken by PennDOT.
By PennDOT.
Or maybe the borough. I just joined the university at the time, and I noticed the change occur, and I'm not sure if it was the borough or PennDOT or both. I think the university was working with both organizations to help improve pedestrian safety along Atherton.
Okay. And then I guess just to follow up on what Laura had asked about with the Houts property and a couple of other properties, there's at least one other that is a dilapidated house on College. So do you think that there are plans that will be moving forward within the next 10 years, within the next 5 years on the Houts property?
So we're not discussing any plans right now. So 5 years can go by really quickly. So I think it's safe to say within 5 years, I don't see anything happening. In 10 years, who's to say? It has to be the right market forces. We have to find the right use. So I know it's something that, my office, we're very interested in doing. We would love to see something happen there. The Smith property and the House property. It is a great opportunity to help link the West Campus with Ferguson and the borough in that location. But we don't have anything concrete right now.
I understand what you're saying about the opportunities there. It's just, it leaves a blight in the area, and it can't be ignored. And so to say it's going to be like that for the next 5 years, when it's been like that for very many years, is really disappointing, particularly when we're trying to encourage some new updated development in that area. I'm really disappointed to hear that there isn't anything concrete and that the university wants to just hang on to it. So, there's nothing else to say about that. I'm hoping that we see something in the next few years, because it's currently it's really unacceptable how that is and how that area is being used.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I hear your concern. I mean, I live here too, and I drive up and down College Avenue in that part of town, and it would be better to have something more active and something built there.
It's Laura. If I could just add one comment, perhaps. I mean, we all understand that the university does not control the market. Perhaps between now and when the market time is right for you all, we could at least strike a balance by agreeing that utilizing it as a construction laydown site is not appropriate. And perhaps if those buildings are actually condemnable, perhaps taking the next step and raising them. And I don't know that they are, but they certainly appear to be. So maybe taking some steps like that to at least improve the look there might be beneficial and possible. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah, we heard Ferguson loud and clear about no more laydown space, and we understand that. So we are looking
Thank you.
for that use. And yeah, if there is a building that's condemnable and if there is a health and safety issue, then we will make sure that that site is secured.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
I would
quick.
make
Sorry.
Go ahead, Prasetya.
So just a quick follow-up on Supervisor Strickland's question about the traffic. There is, so White Course goes, if there was an outlet from White Course, the obvious place perhaps would be in West Campus Drive and Sparks Avenue, that near there where White Course comes pretty close. That would at least allow some of the traffic to diffuse and go either way, and in case there's an accident or something. Is there a reason why you wanted, I know that Atherton is a bigger, stronger street and can handle more traffic. Is there a reason why you don't want that?
Well, initially we were looking at 2 entrances to the garage. We were proposing another access point, whether Sparks, Buckout, Coral Street. We actually conducted an entire study. But when we went forward before the borough in the community, there was severe pushback about having that second entrance. And so we just quickly pivoted and just focused on a 1 entrance only to in and out of Atherton.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just wanted to add a suggestion to go along with what Laura and Lisa have said, which is if it really is going to be 10 years or so before something happens along the house property and the other properties there, I think there should be some consideration to turning it into a temporary green space and make it a green field until such time as there's development to go. Because right now it sits there looking like a parking lot that can't be used as a parking lot. So
Okay.
it's just a suggestion that you can maybe pass to whoever considers those things.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, anything is possible.
Yeah.
I understand your frustration with that.
So is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Neil. We really appreciate your taking the time and effort to make this presentation, because it does help us a lot in our own planning as well. So,
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time and I appreciate your tough questions. And a lot of what you asked me today, I will take to heart, and I can help circulate throughout my office and talk to folks at the university.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Next item on the agenda under unfinished business is continued discussion of stormwater management utility fee. There were several different aspects of this that we have not come to a conclusion how we want to approach them. We also had questions were raised at the last meeting. I think I'll start by turning it over to Dave to update us on those, then go to board discussion, then take any public comment before we do any motions of changes we might want to make or decisions about what the next steps are. So I'll start with Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Miller correctly pointed out, I think when we adjourned the October 19th regular meeting, at the conclusion of the discussion, there was some interest on the part of the board in proceeding a little more strategically over these coming meetings with analyses of various aspects of the proposed stormwater management utility fee, having some additional dialogue about some of the ancillary components of the program and what those might look like, things like the credit policy manual, the billing unit methodology, any programmatic changes that the board may be interested in incorporating, and then a suggestion from, I believe it was Mr. Mitra, to develop a draft of a hardship exemption policy, which we do see in other communities in Pennsylvania and around the country, that would provide an exemption for individuals and families that earn less than a certain established threshold, so that they're not exposed to the fee. They don't have to account for it. So just kind of taking a baby step approach here. With your agenda this evening is a draft first schedule to kind of proceed here, and I'll do a quick screen share. And I can pull the schedule up that I prepared. So as you'll see here, there's not a lot of time between now and the February 1st public hearing that the board scheduled to consider all of these components, but I think the schedule that's presented here can accommodate all of those and give the board adequate time to deliberate and potentially schedule an additional work session or a special meeting to consider some of those components of the program. So this evening here would be the review of the proposed schedule, which we're doing right now. Draft hardship policy scheduled for November 16th would be a draft of the credit policy manual. First meeting in December, a discussion that may be a little bit more elaborate on billing unit methodologies. So we've had board has some discussion about potentially tiering the residential billing unit structure. We've also talked about whether the equivalent residential unit or ERU model was preferable to the 1,000 square foot of impervious methodology that was presented and proposed. Talking about the schedule, these are the programmatic things. What years of the program you're interested in conducting the components of the program, whether it be storm pipe, cammering, and assessment, or acquisition of equipment, whatever the program may be, as was described in the first 8 years in the draft that the consultant put together. Wanted to give some additional time to kind of chew on some of those components in January of 2021, potentially schedule an additional work session if the board's interested in dedicating time specifically to talk about the outstanding issues. Moving ahead to the public hearing on February 1st with consideration on the enactment of an ordinance on February 15th. So, again, it's very tentative, subject to any changes that the board may wish to make this evening. If there's any questions or things that I've omitted, please let me know. We'll work those into the tentative schedule. But this is the roadmap that we prepared to present to you this evening for your thoughts and any amendments or revisions you may wish to make.
Thanks, Dave. So I guess the hardship policy you did have worked out like a rough proposal, or did you have?
I do. So the second component, as Mr. Miller just referred to, is the draft of the hardship policy. So in drafting this, I took a look at a number of examples that were provided by our consultant, Elizabeth Treadway Wood, primarily communities in Maryland that have enacted similar exemptions. Montgomery County was really the template that I used for much of this language. I think some of the commonalities that you see across the ones that I've had a chance to review anyway is that they're indexed based on some established poverty level at the federal poverty level or something along those lines. So what's included here in the draft, firstly, a statement of purpose, which is fairly self-explanatory, and then a table that is, these are 20 figures, federal poverty lines. And what I proposed, and again, this is a very rough draft format, would be to structure the maximum income, earned income that an individual or a household can earn in order to qualify for this exemption. So there's some pretty well-established guidelines on with the federal government. It's worth noting, however, that they don't consider, at least in this application, costs of living. It's nothing regional or specific to central Pennsylvania. What I would probably suggest the board consider if moving ahead with this exemption policy would be that we remove the table itself from the policy, thereby eliminating the need to modify the policy every year as these guidelines change and these thresholds evolve. So we can reference the threshold. We can include that as a component of the policy, but in terms of actually putting the raw dollars, they're more here as a reference. I don't think that they would be appropriate to be included in the final policy that would be enacted by the board. Secondly, the other consideration the board may want to make is, and you can see these maximum income thresholds here are fairly low, particularly for the State College metropolitan statistical area, certainly for Ferguson Township. You may want to consider applying a magnitude of maximum income or the federal poverty level to what you allow as a qualified exemption. In other words, you might say as a board that you think that it should be twice the federal poverty level or 1.5 times, something along those lines, to make it a little bit more reflective of the income limits that we typically see in Ferguson Township in the State College area. But this is essentially a starting point. So, really, many of these policies are pretty straightforward. If you meet the guideline for earned income, you file an application. It's done annually. You have to recertify that you continue to meet those thresholds. And if you do indeed certify that you're in compliance, you qualify for an exemption. And that might either be 100% exemption as described here and recommended in policy, or it might be some percentage of a credit that you can deduct from your total stormwater fee invoice each year that may reflect your ability to pay. So, again, the draft is in your packet, really primarily just to serve as a springboard to have further discussion. Most importantly, of course, is whether the board wants to include a hardship exemption policy. You're not obligated to. Some communities don't, some do. But then secondly, if you do want to move forward, how do you want to define those thresholds? So if you could provide some additional direction this evening, we can go back and work on the language, incorporate it in prior to it being considered for enactment along with the ordinance and the program, as well as give the board some additional time to review those amendments at upcoming meetings.
Thanks, Dave. One thing I would want to point out to the board, especially because some members haven't really been looking at our tax structure and everything that long, is the way this is written. And something we may want to consider is it only considers earned income, which is what our tax base also considers. That would mean if we did adopt a policy like this, anyone whose income is solely Social Security, disability, or pension income would essentially have zero income under an earned income basis. And I think that's where a lot of question comes up, as people who are, whose income comes solely from Social Security, they're not seeing big increases, and would this be harmful? I think, I would prefer, if we're going to do a hardship policy, that we maybe keep the maximum income number lower and not consider unearned income, such as a pension or Social Security. I think that would tend to address some of the comments we've heard about who it is that people are concerned with experiencing a hardship on this. So, just my comment, which I'll throw in first. So, anyone else have thoughts on the hardship policy?
I will add, I think, the question, anticipating the question of what a hardship policy may do to the revenue generated under this fee, we ran some very rough numbers. As Mr. Miller, I think, just illustrated, this can be a difficult a metric to predict because, you know, when you're depending on how you're considering your income or the maximum income, it might reflect who qualifies and does not qualify for this exemption. But, you know, Jenna Wargo put together some numbers using the 2018 ACS data, American Citizen Survey data. So these numbers are a little stale, but I think they're fairly, at least as accurate as we may be able to get them at this point. In 2018, we had about 2,400 individuals reported earning less than $50,000 per year. So I'm using as essentially the maximum threshold that an individual, in this case with 8 or more eight members of the household, would qualify for if they were earning under 50,000 per year. And we had just over 4,500 earn $100,000 a year or less. So basically what I tried to describe was, depending on whether the board was interested in setting that maximum threshold at exactly what the federal poverty level is, or a magnitude of twice the federal poverty level, what you might expect as far as income generated under this program. And, you know, assuming that those numbers are accurate, at a maximum income threshold of exactly equal to the poverty level, you're probably talking right around $94,000 less revenue generated from the program. At a magnitude of twice the federal poverty level, that number inflates to about 177,000. So, you know, that's approximately, and I emphasize approximately, what you can expect the impact might be on revenue generated from a stormwater fee through the enactment of a hardship exemption.
But question on that, Dave, does that take into account just earned income, or is that a number that includes other sources of income?
Purely earned income.
Okay. Laura.
Steve, it's Laura. Thanks. Before we talk more about the hardship policy, I just wanted to comment for a minute and say thank you for the schedule. And my comment would be that for those that are not very familiar with typical local government processes, that this is really a drawing out and a focusing in a way that we do not typically see in local government. And I appreciate very much other board members' willingness to do this and staff's support in doing this, because I think it will help the board and the residents really be able to understand all of the intricacies of this program. And I am very pleased with the schedule, and I do appreciate the addition of the work session, or the opportunity for a work session should we decide that we would like to dedicate an entire meeting to this topic. So thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments at this point, or questions about what Dave brought up? Or
could we, as a board, get comments if anyone else? I want to be sure to be sensitive to each board member's thoughts on each item. And so I'm wondering if we could make sure to hear from each board member their thoughts on the schedule first. It does seem like it will be more straightforward to discuss. So could we make sure that each one of us give some input on that?
sure.
Thank you.
unless anyone doesn't want to, and then you can pass, but.
Right, not forced.
So,
I thought it was okay. I think that the billing unit methodologies and the program schedule might be lengthy discussions. So to have those on one day, I would just say we should, it's December 7th, so hopefully the rest of the agenda is light, or we might need to break that up because that might get into a couple of hours each. I don't know. I'm just anticipating that the billing discussion could be lengthy. And the other one as well.
A quick response to that. I absolutely agree with Ms. Strickland's assessment. I think those are some of the two of the more weighty discussion items. They're very much intertwined with one another. So I think there's value in having them both on the same schedule. I'd also like to invite our consultant, Elizabeth Treadway, to be part of that discussion. So, if we're able to accommodate both those discussions on the same evening, I think that would be my preference. That said, we certainly can split them up if that's the desire of the board. My intent would be to keep the rest of the meeting fairly light with, of course, we'll have the tentative approval of the 2021 annual operating budget and a few other kind of typical things for December meetings. But otherwise, I'll try to keep all the other more substantive agenda items off or reschedule them for later, the second meeting in December.
Yeah, I understand. So that's a good idea to have those together. And maybe we just, like we did the other week where we had that Wednesday where we kind of broke things out into that second meeting. If, maybe we could just kind of plan ahead if we need to break that meeting up. Since there is the budget also.
and we do have, actually, I would prefer to say a special meeting rather than a work session.
Sure.
We're possibly going to schedule, because I think when we get to that, we will be making changes through motions. So I think, and that could happen if we wanted in December, if we felt it was necessary to have a special meeting in December, we could do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if we're discussing those two large items, and then the next meeting is January 4th to schedule the work session to finalize the ordinance, we wouldn't be discussing that then, we'd be finalizing that. So we really need to get through those items that week, essentially.
There is a December 14th meeting, correct?
But that one will probably be a lot of items on it for end of the year. I think this, December 7th, we can pretty much devote to this, but I think if we do that, then December 14th is likely to be a lot of business that has to be finished for the end of the year. Would you agree, Dave? Or
I would.
yeah, I thought there were, if I remember correctly, there are just a number of business items that have to be done at that final meeting. That.
Okay, so I'm just suggesting we look at that week and see what everybody has open so that the public knows that there's a potential for, if we think that we would need to extend the discussion to another day that week so that everyone is on the same page and we've planned ahead for that. Otherwise, we'll just plan for a late night if that's what we want to do. So I just wanted to kind of think through that. The other thing I wanted to say was in anticipation of those discussions, what a couple of items I think we'll need are the updated cost of service projections that have the equipment, the sinking fund, the employees taken out so that we can look at that modeling as well. And then also for the credit program discussion to have that revenue modeled with the credits taken so that we can see those numbers as we're talking about the program.
Can I address that?
The credit policy manual has been drafted, so it's just a matter of sort of giving an estimate, and as rough as it may be, of what that impact might look like, a minimum and a maximum. And described some of that in some of my past discussions, or in some of our past discussions on that too, with sort of best and worst case scenarios modeled. Worst case meaning that everybody qualifies for the maximum credit. Best case meaning what we may more typically come to expect, essentially based on other similarly situated programs around the state. The billing unit, the program schedule has been updated. It is available on the website, so you can locate that information. We'll provide that with the agenda as well at the appropriate time, and it does reflect the removal of the equipment, the sinking funds, the reduction in staff, and the other modifications. So you can see at a glance, as well as by parcel, what the new program schedule would look like for the different billing methodologies.
Thank you.
Okay, Patty or Prasenjit, did either of you have any comments as far as the schedule or proposed meetings going forward?
No, I thank you for the schedule. It helps me wrap my head around what is coming. And I agree with Lisa about the extra time for the billing discussion.
Yeah, I agree with whatever has been said by and large. Just my comments on what we discussed was that I agree also that the cost of living in Ferguson Township is somewhat higher, and the federal numbers are reasonably low. So I would possibly be fine with going at twice if we can afford that. Philosophically, I would possibly, it might not matter that much, but if we really have to cut, we can put a cap on that table that went on, which says that for every child it's $5,000 more, and we put a cap on that. On the one hand, I understand that if you have a large family, you have a lot more costs, but I also don't think government should be subsidizing having lots of children. So that's more of a philosophical thing, but I possibly won't make a real difference that much with respect to our budget. So I'm fine with just saying that twice this number and let it go with that if we can afford that.
Yeah, it's a good point. This is exactly verbatim what you find in Montgomery County, Maryland's hardship exemption. I haven't had a chance yet, though I'm waiting on a return call from their housing department to explore this a little bit further and learn exactly where this came from. I think I tend to agree with you, Mr. Mitra, that, once you kind of hit that 8-member household size, that's probably the cap. I can't imagine we'll run into many households that are larger than that, where there's really a need to adjust that or index that for additional household members. So we could certainly remove that and then just set this as at twice the federal poverty level or whatever it might be. I do think, it's probably advisable in the policy itself, as I said earlier, to not specifically reference the numbers, but maybe allude to this table, which you can find on the federal government website. So, this way it just kind of automatically adjusts as income levels and thresholds change, rather than us having to go back in and amend the policy year to year.
So I guess then if there are any other comments as far as the hardship policy, this would be a good time. Laura. You're muted.
Thank you. I guess I'll just throw one more possible variable into the mix, which I'm recalling from a past life of mine how actually often 1.5 times the federal poverty level is used. And I know we talked about either that number, the level, or twice it. but I think it's fairly frequently that you see 1.5 times. And I think that we should consider that. I'm not sure that twice is necessary. I'm just thinking about myself when I earned about that much, and then what our anticipated fee is going to be. So I guess I'll just put on the table to consider 1.5 times the federal poverty level. That's it.
You know, the main piece of advice, I guess, that we got from our consultant in this was that the demographics of the township can be really the best guide in determining how to establish those thresholds. Some communities automatically exclude them. Others have an application process. I think that's more common, but it's one of those fluid variables that really you need to look at the community and decide whether 1.5, 2 times, exactly, you know, one time the poverty level, you know, what makes the most sense that's going to achieve your goal of providing, you know, families and households and individuals with that relief valve if they truly need it. But also not setting it too high that, you know, it really dilutes the purpose of the program.
Is there any particular marker that our consultant would recommend in terms of, you know, our township, like townships that have that median income typically pick which?
Yeah, I can press her a little more on that. This was her initial response to me. I do think that, you know, it would be really tricky because the demographics are so, you know, dynamic. I mean, if you're talking about, you know, bedroom communities that are largely retirees, like Mr. Miller pointed out before, you're not, you know, you're going to find a lot more individuals and households that qualify for that exemption because, you know, they may be living primarily off of Social Security or capital gains or other methods of income that don't show up under your earned income reporting. So, you know, even if that threshold for similarly sized communities is 1.5 times or twice the federal poverty level, even if they're essentially identical in size and you know, population, I think you may find a different impact, you know, comparatively speaking to Ferguson Township. But I can see if, you know, maybe she has some ready-made examples of communities that she's worked with in the past and what they've set that cap at.
Thank you, Dave. I would like to just mention to the residents, there's some folks that are mentioning that their hands are raised, and I just wanted to mention that as I understood the chair, our process would be to have all the board discussion and then take public input and then go back to board discussion.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of this hardship policy, I would like to have every board member have a chance to comment on it, and then we'll take public comment after that.
Thank you.
I think
Lisa.
I'll just say I tend to agree with Prasenjit's thought of setting it at twice the federal poverty level. And then also I had the same concern as Steve of addressing those with a fixed income and those considerations. So if we think that that answers that, then fine. And the third thing I wanted to bring up is the concern for various nonprofits that will be affected by this. I know we're talking about residential properties at this point, but we still, I think, have heard and understand a lot of the concerns from nonprofits in the township. I'll say cemeteries for one, who you know, have concerns about paying the fee, who are usually tax exempt organizations. So I think at some point we need to discuss what kind of maybe not relief in this in this particular manner, but something else to address those concerns. So possibly in the credit policy, I'm not sure, but I do think we need to think about that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I just feel like everyone's touched upon things that I would add to it, so.
Okay. Well, if board's okay with it, then I think we should go to public comment and get any input that the public has. And I'll ask Dave to sort of lead us through that.
Sure, I'll enable Mark Kunkel here to speak and bring him on.
Good evening, board members. Couple of basic questions. First, is the hardship policy authorized under the Pennsylvania enabling legislation? Dave has talked about Montgomery County in Maryland and where he's received this example, but basic question is, does the enabling legislation that allows for the stormwater utility fee actually allow for a hardship credit program?
So my understanding is that the legislation that would apply allows for credit policies to be enacted. It doesn't specifically address hardship exemptions or other considerations or specific considerations for what has to be or could be included in that policy. There's no explicit or specific prohibition on a municipality's ability to enact a hardship policy. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying, at least there's nothing that says we cannot do it. There are other communities in Pennsylvania that have hardship exemptions or similar kinds of programs. Often what I've seen is that they're incorporated as opposed to a specific exemption policy. They're actually worked into a credit policy or a credit manual, so that instead of saying, hey, this is a specific application for individuals and households that earn less than a certain amount, you would be eligible for a credit if you meet or fall below that threshold. So the short answer is I believe so, that we would be enabled to, that the board, if interested in pursuing this, would be enabled to model a credit policy or an exemption policy, as long as it was equally assessed and it was rooted in some some variable that was measurable. So it can't just be arbitrary. You can't just say, we're going to exclude this geographic area of the township, or we're going to exclude this subset of the population. It has to be indexed or based on some measurable criteria. In this case, if it were earned income, other credits would be if you have a BMP or something like that on your property that would qualify you for that. So that this way, when you're explaining it, it can be, it's equitable, meaning everyone has an opportunity to qualify for it, and that it can be objective and demonstrated. And it's not something that a staff person or the board or whomever would be in a position to make a call in terms of whether or not that would qualify. It has to be something that is objectively measurable, quantifiable, and that can be taken advantage of by the property owner.
Thank you. Second question that I had was, and I think Steve has identified this, that the policy really refers to earned income from W-2 income. What database will the township be using to verify income if other forms of income other than earned income is used to make a determination on a person's eligibility, since the township, is, to my knowledge, does not have access to federal or state income tax filings?
Yeah, that's correct. And Eric's on the call too. I don't know if he, or on the Zoom as a panelist, I don't know if he's got anything to add, but if the measure were anything other than income certification via a W-2, we would have to navigate that and figure out how we would audit it, how we would verify I think that would be, to your point, Mark, a much more difficult standard for us to be able to confirm if we were going beyond the application of just simply earned income as described on your W-2 filing.
Yeah,
we would,
David, I would also suggest that we could contact the CTA, the Center Tax Agency, because they have local taxes. And if the taxpayer on the application allows us to access their income tax information, we could do that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I can bring on Bill Keogh has his hand up here. I can bring him on if you'd like.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
As you're talking about the hardship issues and a policy, just as kind of a reminder and a suggestion, within the ag community especially, many of our farms and the families connected to those farms are in a variety of estate planning mechanisms and I would suggest that as you talk about the hardship policy, especially as it relates to the western end of the township, that you possibly get in touch with Ag Extension Services and talk to them about the different configurations that many of our farms have the opportunity to be in with regard to their estate planning and their estate issue. You know, we talk about ownership of farms and we think about houses, and usually they're owned most frequently by an entity. But in the farm environment, we have a different economic opportunity, and in many cases, in several cases, those farms are estate farms. They're not necessarily a single ownership. And so I would suggest that before you go too far with a policy as it relates to the ag end of things, that somebody talk with Ag Extension and people who are familiar with the whole estate planning process that goes on in the agricultural community. The other comment that I have, because tonight you were also talking about schedule, I guess I'm a little disappointed as a comment in the fact that it looks like the schedule is designed solely toward the adoption of this policy. And there appears to be no time available in the public environment to talk about alternatives to this plan with regard to the issues that this plan is being asked to address. So one has to kind of make the assumption that regardless of what we say as citizens, this plan is on a track to be adopted regardless. And I'm disappointed in the sense that I really would like to see the opportunity for some discussion about alternatives to this plan as a possible route for the township and the supervisors to travel. Those are my only two comments tonight.
Well, Bill, I would comment on that this is not a schedule toward a track toward adoption. It's a schedule toward a vote. And we have 5 members, and it will either be adopted or not adopted based on a vote of the board, and a majority will decide that. So, I mean, we have a schedule going to a vote, but not necessarily a schedule going toward adoption. That will be determined under the current schedule on February 15th. The other point I would make is during our budget discussions, I do intend to introduce discussion of alternatives to a stormwater fee. So that's just a preview of coming attractions there. I think that we will be considering that at the same time. So,
Am I still live or not?
yes.
Okay, I can't tell from this end whether I'm still connected or not connected. I'm encouraged that last statement that you made, Steve, that would go on. I think that there ought to be some way in which we can get some of that discussion and alternatives into the public view, and not just in terms of the supervisor view. I don't know how that would be accomplished, but I think the public is owed the opportunity of hearing about alternatives that might be considered prior to the final vote.
Okay, thank you.
And to that end, I hope, everybody will review the draft budget, take a look through it. There's opportunities for citizen input and comment and suggestions on the budget that we put forward every year. There's other opportunities for, additional recommendations to come from board members and the public alike. Certainly not a one size fits all kind of a proposition. So, fair point. There's plenty of opportunity for that conversation to be had.
Thanks. I'd like to, Steve, if I could.
Laura, go ahead.
Thanks. If I could just add just for folks who are listening at home, again, I want to focus on typical local government processes. Had you been viewing this board with its other members a few years ago, you would have really hit home how we frequently narrow our questions so that we can focus on the details at hand. It's not meant in any way, shape, or form, and I want to make sure everybody at home knows this. It's not meant in any way to exclude any ideas or thoughts, but it's a way to be able to focus without confusion on the item at hand. And so this is a very large topic. And if we were to try to bounce between this and alternatives, it would get even larger and more difficult and unwieldy to understand. So I think for ease of understanding, not for any nefarious reason, we are focusing on each section, or I'm going to use my favorite word, chunk of what might eventually be our past ordinance. And I will reinforce what Steve said. There is no ordinance until there is a vote of the majority of the board to make an ordinance. But I hope I can speak for all my board mates when I say that it is essential to have a well-vetted, well thought out ordinance when we get to the point of vote. And so focusing on these distinct pieces in the manner that we are doing will allow all of us the clarity that we need when we get to that point to feel confident in our votes. So thank you for allowing me that time.
So Dave, do we have any other public comments that have been requested, or?
I do see one more hand raised in the chat.
Okay.
Darren, I can enable him if you'd like.
Thank you.
You there?
Yes.
We keep talking about the credits and so forth for residential properties. The properties that really are my greatest concern are the non-residential properties, partly because we've got in the top 20 at least 2 churches in the areas that are paying $8,000, and I believe the other one's 5 or 6, the Russian Church, Alliance Church. We've got many businesses that are in the top 20. Our dealership paying $15,000. And I don't know about you, but as a business owner, revenues right now for a lot of our businesses in the area are down 50 to 75%. I'm just wondering how we're going to deal with that when there's really not money for businesses and nonprofits to be paying tax at this time.
I myself had a bit of a question. My understanding is that with our expanded schedule and timeline, if you look at the time of recovery from coronavirus, Dave, if we were to follow the exact schedule we proposed, what would be the earliest humanly possible that anybody would have this fee? And I'm gonna just remind us all that we, I think, at least at this point, have all decided that that first year, specifically because of allowing for recovery from coronavirus, at this point, we're still thinking of doing a half of a fee that initial year. Are those 2 things correct?
Right. So the well, what's proposed under the program schedule that's on the website and that we presented to the board in prior meetings is a 6-month proration for fiscal year 2021 if the fee is enacted and implemented next year. So essentially you would see half of the fee that you would see in a typical program year in that first year of the program. You know, the other question is about what the earliest time, what the earliest we could issue bills for under this fee structure if the board moved ahead with enactment of the ordinance in February of 2021. I think it would be challenging, but not impossible for those bills to be issued in fiscal year 2021. I think if we go really anywhere past February, we're talking about a 2022 billing cycle. We typically, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we get our information to RBA, who's our consultant who prepares our tax certificates and mailings by January of each year. So even with a February consideration of this program, we would be working hard to get everything situated from an administrative perspective to have invoices issued fiscal year 2021. Again, I don't think it's impossible, but you know, if we go much past February, we're certainly going to be talking about a 2022 billing cycle as the earliest that we could conceivably issue invoices under this program.
That would be correct. The bills come out March 1st, so if you're looking at the beginning of February, that's probably the latest we could do that.
Right.
Okay, I think the question will be, do we have anything else from the board? I don't think we need a motion on the hardship policy because that's really going to be worked into the credit policy, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've got some good feedback. I wasn't asking for any specific action, but I think I have a general temperature on where the board is on this. Dave and I and Eric can work on some, modifications to the policy and make it a more concrete draft and present it back at one of these upcoming meetings.
Okay. Lisa.
Just a quick question from what Mr. Keogh was saying about the farms and their qualification, whether they're in some kind of a state situation. So if there was a farmer who does not live on the farm, this came up in the farmstead question also, and they were to qualify for this hardship exemption, would they qualify for both the residential property and the farm property?
No, the way it's drafted, it would only be for the residential property.
Okay.
You mean if there's two separate parcels?
Yeah. Okay, so if they live on the property, then if they qualify for the entire thing. But if it's separate, then they do not. Okay.
I'll say yes with the caveat that it may depend on the billing unit methodology that the board elects to proceed with. So if you say in a farmstead application that the dwelling unit itself was going to count as an equivalent residential unit, and the remainder of the farm that was actively in agriculture was classified as a different, under a different billing unit, then it's possible that the board may discount that residential unit, but still assess the fee for the agricultural operation.
Okay.
But it would also be possible to structure it so that it would encompass the additional parcels affiliated with the residential property question?
I mean, I'm hard pressed to think that a farm and active agricultural use is going to qualify under the standards that the board's established. But what's proposed in the policy draft is specifically applicable to residential properties. So it would be, I mean, presumably you could certainly modify it as you deem appropriate, depending on legal review and uniformity of assessment. But if that was something the board was interested in pursuing, we could look into it a little bit further.
So I think you'd have the problem then of fairness between other property owners who own multiple properties. If that they would have to pay on if they lived in another one and qualified for the exemption. So I see what you're saying to try to count that, but I would think that would lead to a lot of other complications.
Although I think the question is, I mean, the purpose of a hardship policy is that if someone has a very low income, we're creating a credit on that basis. And I'm not sure how you would apply that. If you have a working farm that is generating income on different parcels, I'm not sure that how you would apply that, a personal hardship to the parcels. That I think that's where I see a problem with it.
Right. I'm wondering if it's a theory only problem or an actual problem. I'm not sure. It's a good question. But let's say there was a person who lived in Huntington County and farmed a parcel in Ferguson Township. Their residence was in Huntington County, and they weren't actually being very lucrative farmer or whatever, and they would, by their income, qualify, but because their actual living space wasn't on that particular parcel, they wouldn't qualify. So, I mean, like I said, it might just be an in theory problem and not in reality problem. But it is, I guess, something to think about.
Okay, well, thanks for walking through that with me. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it all correctly. It could be a theoretical problem, I don't know, but I think it's something to think about, and then, you know, just make sure we're applying everything fairly across the board. And so I guess I just want to make sure there's no difference depending on how we do the billing between the tiers and the growth boundary and not growth boundary. This would not be affected by any of that. This would apply equally.
Regardless of service area, correct?
Okay.
Anything else? If not, I'll wrap up this discussion and we can move back to it at the November 16th meeting. Going once, going twice. We'll move to the next item, which is a review of draft recreational fire and open burn ordinance.
Thank you. I'll ask Chief Albright to introduce this item.
Thank you. At the August 3rd regular board meeting, the manager and I presented a report on existing fire code and safety regulations. During our research for that report, we identified a deficiency or two, and at the September 8th meeting, a board member offered suggestions for additional burning regulations. Provided with the agenda are some recommendations for updating the township's burning regulations. The board is asked to review the recommendations and provide comments to the staff.
Thank you. Anyone have comments on the draft ordinance?
Thank you. It's Laura. I have a few comments.
Okay.
Chief, in the recreational fires proposed amendment, dried wood, not treated lumber, was there actually already existing in that definition a size dimension?
Yeah. Yes.
There are.
Yeah, in the existing one for code has it right now is defined as a total area of 3 feet. It's a diameter less than 2 feet. I'm sorry, I have it a little messed up there. It's 3
okay.
feet in diameter, 2 feet high.
Great. That is fabulous. That is consistent then with the National Fire Protection Association definition. Wonderful. Actually, that might be my only question. Can you believe it? Oh, I did have one other.
I was just getting ready to note the date on the calendar.
You funny guy. The special prohibitions, two items on that. One, could we add the drought watch? I see you have warning and emergency declaration. Can we add the drought watch?
We can add it. There's no.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then could we get a solicitor's opinion on the fireworks? Adding.
I think we can. I mean, right now, what's been explained to me kind of on the statewide basis is generally since the act carved out specifics for allowing agriculture and display fireworks, that by remaining silent on that, the legislation didn't intend to give us the ability to regulate consumer fireworks more than what they have in place.
So are you saying the parenthesis fireworks is not going to be in there because we cannot do it?
right now, I still think we can try to run through our solicitor, but I know through my colleagues in other areas, through my regional police association, that that's what guidance that they have been given as well.
Thank you. Okay, that's fine. And I'm glad you did mention the agricultural fireworks, because that did come up, that if we could pass this, that they would be exempted. But obviously we can't if we can't. So do they even not allow us to enforce our own noise ordinance in terms of fireworks? So could it actually be the case that you have somebody that's doing fireworks at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the morning all through the night, and we can't regulate?
I mean, if you start getting into hours of inconvenience, such as I think it would be pretty easy to, argue to the court after 10 o'clock on a non-4th of July night that I think we'd be in good legal standing and we would win that case.
Gotcha. Thanks. There is some sanity in the world. Good.
Any other questions or comments? Lisa?
Thanks. I just had a couple. So I just wanted to make sure I understand what would change in the RR and RA as far as open burns that are allowed.
R1, well, R1, R2, R3, R4, you couldn't get an open burn permit, but you could still have a recreational fire.
Okay, so that's how I read it. So this shouldn't have an effect on the RA or RR.
Right. For recreational fires, yes.
Okay, because it was just no burning trash, no burning leaves.
Right.
And that's applicable to the RA and RR as well.
Yeah, it said that specific carving for the R1, R2, R3 was for the open burn, getting an open burn permit. And they won't be allowed to have that open burn without a permit. And since they can't get a permit in that area, they wouldn't be allowed to burn. However, the recreational fire is something that you can have a recreational fire in any.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. And then I did receive a question, just wanting some clarification on, because this is all addressing outdoor fires. So this doesn't address anything that's coming from a fireplace indoors or a wood burning stove indoors. And so if somebody were to complain about smoke or odor from one of those indoor sources, that would be no different than if they had complained about that in the past. So is that right? If they were going to complain, they were going to complain. But is there's nothing regulating that. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all I had. And then the way we addressed those complaints for the outdoor smoke and odor complaints from an outdoor fire was to increase the distance that it can be from the property line.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think those were my only questions.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Actually, Lisa brought up something that reminded me, there is something else that does relate to open barn, and maybe Chief, you found it in code regulations. But two things. One is that there would be a 30-foot clearing around an open burn. And that would be a clearing free of ignitable debris. And that was found in multiple sources as a recommendation. And The other, sorry, navigating so many screens. That all open burns shall be, and this would be proposed to include RA and RR, which should not be a hardship for them, given the acreage we're talking about. But that all open burns shall be at least 50 feet from adjacent property. And that was specifically to allow the locus of control to be seated with the burner person and not the adjacent neighbor. So what you find in the urban wildland interface could be, say, for example, a 10-acre property owner that's adjacent to a 1-acre property owner could be doing their open burn 2 feet from that 1-acre parcel, thereby putting the burden of the debris-free area on that 1-acre property owner. So that 50-foot setback simply ensures that that debris-free zone can be maintained by the property owner who's doing the burn. So that would be something that I would like to see and hear. It's not a prohibition, but the thing is that typically that 1-acre property will have a house on it. And then that adjacent 10-acre, 20-acre, 50-acre, 250-acre, 780-acre parcel, you know, they have all this space. They can do their open burn into their property a little more, where they can maintain that safety. So that would be the only other thing.
I know in one of the amendments here in the new sections, it talks about safety zone for open burn smokers, and it talks about 50 feet from the adjacent property line.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're talking about there, or?
Yeah. And basically, I think that it could, I don't recall, but I believe it could be inserted in our code regulations as defining that all open burns shall be 50 feet from adjacent property line and shall maintain a 30-foot debris clearing area around them. And I don't think that should negatively impact anybody that's out here doing open burns. Just give them a little bit, you know, of thought for their neighbors that they might not really be thinking about.
Because then that information would be associated with code issuing the permit versus.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And that's it. Thank you. It was neat to see your process of how you really kind of whittled down that big stuff into these very clear, defined regulations.
Well, I think also some of that information that you provided will probably be helpful for maybe like a flyer on safely burning too. It's something that we could incorporate in our website.
That'd be great.
Okay, and I guess there's no action required on this, just giving feedback to the chief, so.
Yep, I think we got the feedback. We will work on putting a little more framework to this as a draft ordinance and present it back to the board for your review, any final comments you may have, and ultimately authorization to advertise for public hearing.
Great. And I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess here before we continue with new business. So I'll see everybody at 9:15. Okay, are you back, Laura? Oh, wait a minute or so here. Okay, looks like we're all here now. So move on. The new business, we have the consent agenda, which includes a special events permit and a request for CNET sponsorship from PSU Weather Service. Anyone want to pull either of those off for discussion?
I can
Lisa?
ask a quick question. I just wanted to know if that is the request for CNET sponsorship. Is this giving approval or is this for bringing it back for discussion?
This would be for approval. There's really no established policy on how outside groups request CNET sponsorship. We've had them before. Spring Creek Watershed Commission commonly asked for the township to sponsor CNET coverage. This was a request that came in from the Penn State Weather Service Club. They are required to raise funding for 50%. The other half is covered by the university. So that's another component of their program. So they've reached out to the township to see if we'd be willing to incorporate that into our CNET contribution. So we wouldn't actually see the impact of this of the two programs until it was they go on a rolling 5-year average. But this would be to approve the request for CNET sponsorship.
Okay, so then I guess I would request that we pull that off the consent agenda.
Okay. Okay. So that leaves the special events permit as the remaining item on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda with that one item.
Second from Laura.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We'll put that request for CNET sponsorship at the end of the new business then. So, next item is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the chairman and secretary to execute a subrecipient agreement for the disbursement of Center County CARES Act relief block grant funds to the Center Region Council of Governments.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments fairly brief on this. The board has a copy of the resolution that's been advertised for public hearing with your agenda this evening. It authorizes the chairman and the secretary to execute a subrecipient agreement for the disbursement of Center County CARES Act relief block grant funding to the Center Region Council of Governments. This item was referred to member municipalities at the September 29th General Forum meeting. Township was eligible for just over $183,000 in CARES Act block grant funding from the county and has utilized these funds to offset our unforeseen expenditures in association with response to the pandemic. These include personal protective equipment, costs associated with cleaning and sanitizing the township building, and any other related costs that were qualified under that program. COG is not an eligible recipient under the CARES Act, and although they have received reimbursement through other federal programs like the Payroll Protection Program and other qualified agencies that are affiliated that have had some access to relief funding. However, if the township chose to, we could designate them as a subrecipient under the agreement, and they would then be eligible for some of our allocation of the $183,158 that we've received. It's worth noting to the board that we've accounted for all of those dollars already. We've applied for reimbursement. Our remaining reimbursement was just approved by the county controller last week. So that essentially means that we've accounted for all of these dollars, which is why I'm not recommending that we designate the COG as a subrecipient under this agreement. However, if the board is interested in doing so, the resolution's in your packet, and the recommended motion would be to adopt the resolution. Otherwise, I'm not recommending any action be taken.
Okay, well, I'll note that, we do have the staff recommendation not to adopt. However, we have advertised a resolution. So I would like a motion as stated in the agenda, and then we can discuss whether we want to pass it or not. Anybody care to read it?
I'll read it. Okay. So I'll read the recommended motion.
Okay.
Okay. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution authorizing the chairman and vice chairman to execute a subrecipient agreement for the disbursement of Center County CARES Act Relief Block Grant funds to the Center Region Council of Governments.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I suspect there is some.
It's Laura. I'll say, we as a contributor to COG's budget, mandatory, I think, is 24% or something to this effect right now for Ferguson Township. We're going to have to make it up. And so I think that we should just do that in the normal budget process and not via this. That's what makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Or? Well, I'll just comment that I agree with Laura. I think because the COG budget process does allocate funds from municipalities, I think that the best way to do it is through the budget process, and not. And also, our application for reimbursements was pegged to specific costs that we had incurred. So I tend to agree with Laura that we should not adopt the resolution. So. Anyone else?
And just to be clear in all this government talk, that doesn't mean those costs won't be covered by our budget. It just means they'll be covered in a different manner.
Yep. Okay. If there are, this is a public hearing, so is there any members of the public that care to address the board on this matter?
Don't see anybody.
Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-32. Ms. Stevens?
No.
Ms. Strickland?
No.
Ms. Danini? I didn't hear that, I'm sorry. Ms. Danini?
We didn't hear you vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Mitra?
No.
Okay, that motion fails. Next item on the agenda is the review of the 2021 Draft Center Region Council of Governments Summary Budget.
Thank you. I'll do a quick introduction of the two representatives from COG that we have attending tonight. The October 28th General Forum meeting, the draft summary budget was referred to member municipalities for consideration. Comments are due back to the COG Executive Director by November 17th. We have both Eric Norenberg, the COG Executive Director, and Joe Vigilone, the COG Finance Director, to respond to any questions the board may have. I provided a link in the narrative to the draft summary budget to help guide discussion.
Thank you. So I guess I'll start if Eric or Joe cares to address the board on the budget, and then we'll have discussion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to make a few opening comments. We have gone through a kind of a long process, starting with the early days of the pandemic, to work with the Finance Committee of the COG to try to prepare and present a very lean budget. What was requested by the Finance Committee was to prepare a status quo budget that was as economical as possible, but we've also worked closely with municipalities along with the Finance Committee then throughout the review process to identify as many cost savings as possible. As I mentioned during the General Forum meeting, week ago, we did have and are still having furloughs of staff. We have gone after as much federal CARES Act and other federal money as possible to offset losses and unforeseen expenses this past year. So we've really tried to make this as level a budget as possible. And this is the summary budget that ties back to the detailed budget that was approved and recommended by the Finance Committee for your consideration. So Joe and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I guess I had thought about going through the budget section by section, but I'm not sure that's really necessary. I think, you know, everyone has the link to the budget. So I would just sort of open it up to any questions that anyone has on the COG budget. At this point, we can make any comments or recommendations. Changes to the budget would have to be done by a vote of the municipalities in COG, but we can certainly make recommendations. And also, if there are comments about this budget that should carry into the Finance Committee discussions next year, this would be an appropriate time to make those comments and submit them so they would go to the Finance Committee. So I'll just open up to anyone has any comments on the COG budget instead of trying to go through the whole section by section, because I suspect a lot of them won't have any comments. So.
Steve, it's Laura.
Yeah.
I don't mind starting. Something I've been thinking about for some time is how the COG formula changes depending on program. In particular, I'm talking about the counting of participants or not. And I guess at one point I thought that it was either kind of a yes, no. You either count participants and that drives it, or you don't count participants. Then we explored a little bit the Active Adult Center, which even within that, it has a mixed formula where for the municipalities, we count participants, but for the county, it is a lump sum. And I would like us to make a comment that we would like the Finance Committee to review that process. So I think that we talk a lot about fair and uniform, and I'm not sure, to me, that does not necessarily seem fair or uniform. Maybe it comes out in the end as being so, and I understand we can't control the county per se, and I'm not asking we should try, but if what we're doing is formulaic with them, perhaps a simple formula should apply to us as well, as opposed to counting participants. I do believe this also could possibly drive a streamlined administration type of thing within the Active Adult Center, to not have to be counting and keeping track of the participants per municipality. So I guess that that would be one of my comments. Maybe Steve, you have some insight, being you've been here longer.
No, I think I tend to agree that it's something we should look at. We have evolved a number of different apportionment schemes over time. Obviously, some things like the fire company is going to be different from the fire program is only for participating municipalities, but that's a simple adjustment of the general COG formula. The adult center is a totally different formula. The library is a totally different formula, and I would even say that should be reviewed, because I'm not sure that checkouts really actually corresponds to library usage, because the library has a number of other costs besides the number of books or number of ebooks that are checked out, because you've got the building usage. So I would favor reviewing everything that's not just straight COG formula and determine whether there's a good reason for it being different.
I would
put the comment that way.
I would completely support that. I think it's time for us to do a deep dive in terms of that.
Right. And we could even take a look at the COG formula itself and determine if that needed to be discussed, but that's a very deep dive because it requires going into the articles of agreement for COG. So it would be something would have to end up, any changes to that would have to be unanimous agreement of all the municipalities. So, but I think as a comment that would be a good, just that we should look at the formulas and determine whether they should be what they are.
That'd be great. And then just to rephrase that, the COG formulas that are not just utilizing the formula,
right,
but that utilize other variables such as participants.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
I agree. So,
what do others think about that? Great.
Yes, seeing nods. So I think we can put that as a comment.
Yeah, I mean, in the worst case, we can look at in some of these cases, like the library, there should be reasonably easy to measure sort of the fixed cost versus the variable costs, and do some formula based on, partly based on usage and partly based on a fixed cost.
Okay. Any other comments on the budget?
Well, I do have some comments about content, not a lot, because I do agree. I appreciate the effort by staff preparing this budget to prepare a lean budget. The few comments I have, one, I would like us to consider as a board asking that the COLA and merit raises, I know it's found in the program plan, but it relates to the budget, that they not be scripted and automatic, but that they in some way relate to the municipalities that are supporting them. And so I don't know what I'm proposing exactly, perhaps an average of the municipalities' proposed COLA and merit raises. I have concern about an automatic increase that is higher than our staff may be getting. And I would like to try to somehow, in an appropriate way, relate those two things.
Yeah, I do have some comment on that. Those aren't automatic. I mean, it is set by the Finance Committee. It's proposed in the program plan, but the Finance Committee actually adopts it. The COLA part has been pretty much a standard thing based on a specific number that is used each year. The one problem I see with coordinating it is generally the COG budget schedule runs ahead of the municipal budget schedules.
Correct.
So those COG sort of sets the first number.
Correct.
Before any municipalities have even discussed it. And I'm not sure how and in order to set the budget so that all the municipalities have the time to discuss the budget prior to adoption, I'm not sure how we would coordinate that. I think we can make the comment that we'd like to see some effort to coordinate those with municipalities, but I'm not sure I think it would be a discussion we can't really have here, but we could
Correct.
propose there. Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. I've thought about how COG budget establishes first and but I think if we put it out there as something to discuss, we could potentially have some movement on it.
Yeah. I think that unless anybody has any objection, we could submit that as a comment. Seeing no objections, got another one.
And then I think my last item, at least for now, until I hear others, is I don't know if they're in yellow in this budget or if it's in the detailed budget, but there are a number of costs, purchases, expenditures associated with Whitehall Road Regional Park in this budget. And they are in particular vehicles that I'm referring to. And as you know, we do not have any place to put them at Whitehall Road Regional Park. And Whitehall Road Regional Park seems like it could be delayed again. And so I'm wondering if perhaps it would be wise to push those costs into next year, remove them from this year's budget until we know that we can take care of them properly. I wouldn't want to buy a bunch of new vehicles and not have any idea how to keep them in a good condition in a garage type of a facility, which we all know there isn't one for them. So I think we're putting the cart before the horse. It was significant amount of costs. We are interested in cost saving, and I see that as not only a potential cost saving for this year, but also in terms of proper maintenance. I see it as responsible use of our tax dollars. Out there for discussion. But other than that, the budget was pretty lean, and I think they did a good job.
Yeah, I guess, so basically you're saying we should take a look at whether those are justified by the current situation for this.
Correct.
I'm okay with that comment. Is that way to send it forward? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would support that too. If we don't need it this year, then I would propose that we don't buy it this year. Instead, go do it next year or closer to when we'll need it.
Yeah. Joe, looks like you have a comment.
No, I don't know why I told me I was talking, but
okay.
I'm up there now. I'll just say real quickly. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean it can't be deferred. It doesn't mean it'll automatically be purchased. We had a number of code vehicles in the budget this year that we elected not to purchase based upon COVID. We weren't using them. You know, they weren't necessary to be replaced, so we didn't replace them.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Joe.
Just a follow-up question. Yeah, just a follow-up question on that. We are, because I'm new, I think we will have some amount of head scratching and managing things in our own budget. So, you know, it's great that we won't buy it this year, but if we have to, you know, because it's in the budget, if we have to allocate those funds this year, I would rather allocate those funds next year. And that's where I was coming from.
I agree with Prasenjit, and I would add that it, for me, the way I'm looking at it isn't also just a matter of the need, like if we don't need it, we won't buy it. But I'm even saying, I don't know that we should buy it without being able to properly care for it. and I don't know that we can. So it's both of those things.
One thing that I'd like to ask Joe, if I'm right on this. I don't think it would affect our budget because I believe all those purchases are out of a capital reserve fund, which really is set over a number of years. So things move from one year to another within that.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately it does show up in our budget, but I think moving them a year doesn't really change our budget.
Yes, one of the things I was hired to do back in 2010 was to create a capital improvement program to level off the fundings for those exact type of purchases. You know, Ferguson does the exact same thing with some of their larger equipment and different things, and that's what we've done. So we already accrued funds leading up into this.
Okay, so that's good to know. So then my point is not as much of a concern, but I think Laura's point as to, I mean, in general, if you're not going to use those machines, maybe next year we'll have a better machine, or, you know, how do we, where do we keep that? How do we maintain those and so on? I would rather buy it closer to when we would use it, just from a, yeah, and you can achieve that by not buying it, which I also agree. So maybe this isn't a big point.
Okay, are there any other comments on the budget? I don't have any because having looked through it line by line, I've got all my comments in so far before we got it. So.
Steve, I just wanted to ask about the Millbrook Marsh, the Spring Creek Education Building, and kind of where we're at on that in terms of our contributions, the building process, where they are in fundraising, and what's happening with that.
Okay, I think I'll throw that to either Eric or Joe. I think I know the answer, but I don't know it as well as either one of them would. So.
Also,
Eric, do you want to take that one? Okay.
I can go ahead and start. This is Eric, and then Joe can chime in as well. So grant funding as well as donations have been received or approved for the project. And based on the timing, one of the questions that was brought up by the Finance Committee was, can the municipal support for the project be staged over time to afford a greater savings in the first year? So it's actually staged out with $50,000 in the first year, $100,000 in the second year, and $50,000 in the third, to enable that to stretch out a little bit further into the future, but to coincide with the timing of the construction and the grant from the state. But Joe, can you fill in the gaps there for me, please?
Sure can. What was initially proposed in the budget was $100,000 in 2021 and $100,000 in 2022, with the anticipated project completion date in mid-2023. What this budget does is it starts the contributions the second half of 2021. So while it's $50,000 in 2021, you will not receive a bill in the first or second quarter. You'll start getting a bill in the third quarter of 2021 for $25,000, and it'll be $25,000 a quarter over the next 8 quarters until the project is done. Also, in terms of donations, we just last week received a 5-digit donation, a mid-5-digit donation, so it was pretty significant towards the project. So fundraising is going very well. Is that me that is doing that sound issue?
And I would point out that 200,000 is to all the municipalities, not Ferguson, spread out over the time.
Okay, thanks. I guess, you know, once the issues with the boardwalk came up, I was wondering why, you know, that, I guess why the, you know, fundraising for the building kept going. So, and that wasn't immediately prioritized. I guess my question is, was that considered to pause the education building and prioritize the boardwalk. I'm just thinking, if the boardwalk can be repaired, it could be extremely expensive. It's unknown what it could cost, or it might not be repairable. And then would that impact usage on the buildings there? So, if they don't have their full facility that people are used to. So, I just was wondering what the discussion was in deciding to move forward with the building.
One part of it is, Joe, go ahead.
I was going to say I could speak to that, but I think that is a better question for Pam Salakangas. I mean, you're more into a programmatic question, and I'm sure it had to do with where we were in the process and everything came apart. But I think Pam answering that question will be better than myself. Maybe Eric can answer it. He has a better idea, but I would rather you get the answer from the person who's most closely working with it.
Because it seemed like.
Certainly,
go ahead.
I agree with Joe. The timing was underway with the planning of the building before I got here, but the issues with the boardwalk were identified right around this time last year, and that's why there's now a feasibility study underway. So at that point, both the grant work as well as the fundraising for the education facility had already been underway for quite some time. So as Joe said, I think it would be good to have Pam provide a more detailed answer and timeline. And we'd be happy to, if you want to include that as one of the questions, we could certainly get back to the board on the details of that for both projects.
No, that makes sense. I think, and that could be true about the timing. I don't know where, the planning had been going on for quite some time. So the plan for the building was there before the issues with the boardwalk came up, but I'm not clear on what funding or grants have been secured when the issues with the boardwalk came up. So, I don't know how far along they were in that process. So I'm just curious. I mean, I love the marsh and the buildings there, and we use them a lot. So I want it to be successful and continue. So I was, I'm really hoping that the boardwalk can be fixed, and I just hope that there is money to fix it if it's possible. It could be a really expensive project. So.
Yeah, I can say that we had a lot of dedicated funding already in place for the building, and it was raised for phase 2 of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, is that building is about 90% funded by either grants or designated funds from outside the municipalities. So they wouldn't be transferable to, and our funding, the 200,000 that Joe was talking about was passed as a match to a grant. And we committed to pay the money once the grant was, in order to receive the grant.
Absolutely. So, yeah. No, I understand that. I guess I'm just, I'm concerned about the timing of the process, undertaking the feasibility study for the boardwalk is time consuming. And so, I'm just concerned about the both sides of the marsh there, the building side and the boardwalk side. So I didn't know that it was 90% fundraised at the time that the boardwalk was partially closed. So that does make sense.
While we're talking about Millbrook, can somebody remind me where we landed on in the lease in terms of, I have nightmares about this, in terms of Penn State's right to just take it back at any time? Could somebody remind me? Is it they give us 1 year notice and then they just get it all back? That's what I recall. This would be a Joe or Eric question.
Eric, I can speak to it if you're not comfortable or don't have the knowledge on it.
Go ahead, Joe, please.
Okay, I believe the lease was redone but it's contingent upon finishing phase 2. If we finish phase 2, we get an automatic 40-year lease, I believe is what the time frame is, with Penn State for that property, that they can't terminate it within a year. I could be wrong on the termination type of thing, but I believe they said they would take it out 40 years from the date that we got certificate of occupancy, I think is what they said. So I would need to look at that more. I would need to look at that more closely, but because Pam was taking the lead on that, but that's what I remember, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that.
Thanks. As a comment, could we just ask for a reminder of what the termination clause is in that lease? We can't do anything about it, but it's just, I would be comforted to know that that termination clause didn't make its way into there. Could we maybe?
Yeah, we can ask that as a clarification question. That.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if Joe, if you could look into exactly how it's worded, that'd be great.
Could someone remind me of the request of contingency fund dollars for this budget? I believe there was a request for an increase in the contingency fund that I can't find right now, and maybe I'm misremembering it. If there is a request for increase in the contingency fund, I am not supportive of it. Just because we're trying to keep a really tight budget. I don't know what the reason would be for it. I think it's continuing to go up, and I really think of that as a slush fund. And I feel that this is the kind of year that, as opposed to slush fund, we prefer specific pointed requests coming to the forum on a case-by-case basis. If I'm misremembering, please forgive me.
I can speak to that, Laura. What it was, the contingency fund was liquidated. It was typically kept around $35,000. We used some of it and didn't replenish it a few years ago. So we got down to about $27,000 to $28,000. And we had pledged all those funds to be utilized in the recruitment of Eric for the new executive director. We did not use all of those funds. So what we had proposed was a $10,000 increase in this year. But since we didn't use all the funds, we only asked for $6,000 of municipal contributions this year instead of $10,000 because we had some savings associated with the recruitment of the executive director.
So I did kind of misremember that then. Okay, thanks.
It was kind of confusing. We offered to give a rebate back or just to put the savings into this year's budget, and the municipalities mostly elected to put the savings into this year's budget.
I have, I think, a final question. I know I'm so tricky. I keep saying that. It's related to staffing. Are there staff, I believe the answer is yes, that are proposed to be hired specifically for Whitehall Road Regional Park? And this is a two-part question. I believe I saw, yes, I saw advertised today, Center Region Park and Rec is advertising recruitment for 2 full-time park caretaker 1 positions to start in January 2021. Is that like just being a little bit, is that some, first is the ad I saw based on funding that was this year's funding that just hadn't been utilized? Or is it assumptive about next year's funding? And then the other part is, are we planning on hiring is there in the budget hiring that would be dedicated to Whitehall Road Regional Park? Thank you.
So one of the positions is a replacement and the other is one that was in the current year's budget. And we delayed filling a number of positions at the beginning of the pandemic. So we tried to get through this year by mostly using seasonal staff wherever possible and so we left those two positions vacant. So they were deferred and the final decision was made on recruiting for those positions over the past couple of weeks as we looked ahead towards the needs and the challenges that we had with keeping up with maintenance with fewer full-time and more seasonal than would be ideal. Joe, maybe you can answer the other part of that question if there's anything else to add.
I went looking through the program plan and the summary budget real quickly. I know there is a staffing increase projected going through, but I don't have the exact timeline within there, and I apologize, I am not seeing the parks caretakers. But what Eric said for those in the 2020 to the 2021 is absolutely 100% correct. There was a retirement in that which was not filled, and then the other one was a projected start date in mid 2020 that was not filled due to get some savings associated with COVID. I do remember there was more hours and more caretakers being looked for going forward to meet up with some industry-wide standards. I think they, even the comp plan identified that they were understaffed, but I don't know the particulars of what they're looking to do in terms of staffing. I had hoped to pull it out of the budget, or the program plan, but I did not see it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Appreciate the effort. So thanks for helping me understand the ad. I guess my comment would be that I would be seeking support for would be that similar to the equipment, I do not support hiring staff for Whitehall Road Regional Park additional needs. I also am possibly not supportive of hiring staff simply to address what the comp plan identified as a deficiency, just based on that sole factor, given that I was on that committee and had significant difficulty extracting from the consultants what they were basing their recommendations on, and fail to support some of those recommendations because they were not supported by evidence.
I support your comment, Laura.
Thank you.
I would as well. And I wonder if, there was, I don't know, with the delay of the park again, or continued delay of the park, does that alleviate whatever perceived pressure there was on that maintenance staff that they expected to have happen in 2021? So, I would assume that when that park is done, there will need some more staff possibly, but like you said, we're not there yet. So yeah, I would support that.
I do believe there's a bit of unsurety in terms of if those positions are indeed in the program plan and budget. So it would be an if then statement. So if they are, then these are our concerns.
Yeah, I don't think there are any positions for 2021. I don't remember for certain, but I don't think there was any additional positions requested for 2021, you know, for either for Whitehall Road or just in general. I think it was static in terms of numbers.
You are correct, Steve.
Yeah.
Right. The only additional staff requested for 2021 was for the fire program, the part-time employee that went through this past fall committee review.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Dave, you have a summary of where we were?
I do. So I've got the board is requesting that all programs that are not assigned based on the COG formula be evaluated to determine whether there are more equitable means of assessment than currently being utilized. The board would like to consider that cost of living adjustments and merit raises are not essentially automatic, but there's some way related to what the municipalities that's supporting them are considering, potentially an average, something along those lines. Next, that vehicles and staff tied to the development of Whitehall Road Regional Park ought to be deferred until at least 2022 or until the COG can ensure that they will be properly maintained and put to good use. That's the vehicles, not the staff. And then nextly, that some questions about Millbrook Marsh Nature Center. The board would like to know more about the termination clause in the lease. What are the details of the proposed projects and the timing of the construction of the education building? How is the construction and repairs of the boardwalk making an impact on that project? And I believe that covers it all. Unless I missed something.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll wordsmith it and get it over to Eric.
Great. Thanks. And
Great,
thanks
thank you.
to Eric and Joe for being here, sitting through our whole range of discussions till we got to this. So appreciate your being here with us.
Yes,
Thank you.
you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Thanks for having us.
So, okay, the next item on the agenda is the scheduling of interviews for applicants to vacancies on township authorities, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. So this is an annual exercise of the board to, since the policy was established, to describe how the board goes about filling vacancies on our authorities, boards, and commissions. There's an attached, that policy is attached. There's an interview process for interested applicants. The board is, the board would like to schedule them. So I do have as of this afternoon, as a matter of fact, an update on where we have applicants and where those vacancies are. Pull that report up and share screen. You should be able to see this. And what you'll find is we have a number of positions that are vacancies that are upcoming where there are no additional applicants beyond the incumbents in those positions that are interested in being considered. So, and yet there are others where we have one or more or two or more applicants that are interested in being considered. So the board has typically elected to do, and this is still a relatively new policy, isn't within the last 2 to 3 years, is if there's vacancies in positions where there's only one person who's expressed interest in filling those vacancies, the board's elected not to interview those candidates and just place them on the organizational agenda for appointment beginning in 2021. But you'll see some here, and I'll use the Planning Commission where Bill Keogh's, as I understand it, has already suggested that he's not interested in reappointment. So we have Louis Steinberg who can be considered, but we also have, and he's applied for either the Planning Commission or the Zoning Hearing Board. We also have 2 alternates that can be considered for that seat on the core board, Lisa Rittenhouse and Chen Zhang. So the board may want to interview all three of them. Still waiting on response from both Lisa and Chen about whether they would be interested in being sat on the core board. Possibly one will be, both may be, neither may be. So we'll see what they come back with that. The zoning hearing board, Swami Anatheswaran is the only person or individual whose term is expiring. Louis Steinberg has also expressed an interest in being appointed to the zoning hearing board. So the board may want to interview Swami and Louis for consideration for that seat. Only one alternate, Stephanie Rocco. She's expressed she's submitted a request to be reappointed. Mike Jacobson, only person rotating off the tree commission. He's asked for reappointment as well. Tax review board, we have two incumbents that are there's three vacancies. There are two that are currently filled, and then there's one that's truly vacant that we don't have any applicants for, and we don't have anybody to who's been considered, no incumbents in that position either. Board striker, State College Borough Water Authority, CNET representative Thomas Giles. Those are just one vacancy, one person submitted request for reappointment. We have several on SCLO Library Board. Actually, Sue Werner is is still seated on that board. Louis Steinberg is our other applicant who's asked to, well, he's essentially termed out. So that's why he's asked to be on the Planning Commission and Zoning Hearing Board. But we have three applicants for the vacancy that he'll leave behind on the SCLO Library Board, including Georgia Abbey, Chandra Bose, and Barbara Ziff. I just got that in today. So the board may want to interview those applicants. We have a representative from the University Area Joint Authority rotating off. We have two applicants for that vacancy, Mark Kunkel, Kevin Mullen. So really what I'm asking the board to do is if there's any of these positions that you're not interested in conducting interviews for, let me know and we won't bother asking those folks to be available. And then for the ones that you do wish to conduct interviews, maybe I can, send out a doodle poll to get availability. We don't necessarily have to schedule it this evening, but just to know which vacancies you want to conduct interviews for, and I can get some dates circulated and plan accordingly.
Okay, one thing, Dave, on the UAJA representative, I'm actually a board member.
Right, I saw that.
I thought you did, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that late
today. Could you check and see when that term ends for me? I think it's the end of next year, but I'm not certain of that.
Sure, will do.
So we may, if it's the end of this year, we may have two vacancies, in which case I would be applying for reappointment. If it's the end of next year, then we have one vacancy.
Yeah, you were appointed to serve the remainder of, can't even think of his name right now. No, it was other guy that moved out and
okay. We have a note from Bill Keogh that he is interested in reappointment.
Oh, okay. Well, then I stand corrected. I apologize. That was okay. So we have two.
I was gonna say, is the world ending or what? Holy moly! I'm confused.
I would say for the Planning Commission, if you could check with.
Have already cast their ballots, leading to questions about how the
if you could check with Lou Steinberg and see if he's interested in a alternate position, we do have an opening there.
Mm-hmm.
I think typically we bring people in as an alternate, so we may, and I suspect he would be okay with that as a.
So if that's the case, then
instead of the core board, if he would be okay with a alternate position.
If either Lisa or Chen were interested in the core board vacancy,
well, it looks like we won't have one.
Bill said he is. Bill said.
Well,
Bill said
although
he's
there's still a vacancy, and the way we've done it before is even if someone's coming off and wants to be reappointed, we don't do an automatic reappointment.
Correct.
We
if there are
do-
other applicants for that
We
vacancy.
we interview all applicants, including one applying for reappointment.
Right, but I'm confused about what's happening because I thought you just said the other person was Lewis and you were asking, does he want to be an alternate?
Yeah, that was my question, is if he's okay with just applying as an alternate, then that we do have an opening there with no other applicant, is what I was thinking.
But then
Correct.
what I'm saying is we would be left with just one candidate.
Right.
So then we wouldn't be doing an interview for the main vacancy.
Yeah.
Unless Lisa or Chen Zhang were interested in being appointed to the core board instead of being alternates.
Oh.
Has either of them expressed any interest in that, or?
No, but we're waiting to hear back.
Oh,
from-
okay. So this isn't the final list then? Do you have here? If you're waiting.
Well, right. So we've not yet heard confirmation from all of the incumbents that they want to be, that they want to be reappointed. I think it's safe to say that, given that Bill said that he's interested in reappointment, that all of them are interested in being reappointed. I'm looking through the list. I don't see anybody that I would think otherwise. So, that being the case, if either, Ms. Rittenhouse or Ms. Zhang wanted to be appointed to the core board instead of serving as alternates, then the board may want to pursue interviews. If Lewis is okay with being appointed as an alternate to the planning commission, and presumably that same logic would apply to the zoning hearing board, then we could appoint him to one, the board could appoint him to one or both, frankly. So I just want to know what interviews you want to schedule for which vacancies, and then I can circulate something for the date.
It's just hard to, sort of like this table's difficult and then there's a bunch of questions. So it's kind of, we're trying to get our minds wrapped around where the policy should be applied. So clearly in SCLO and UAJA, we are going to have interviews.
Yep.
And it looks like.
And I think
We should-
if Lewis was interested in applying as an alternate for either, or no, you can't be on the planning commission and zoning hearing board
That's true. You
at the same
can't.
time. So it'd be
Good
one,
point.
he would have to choose one or the other.
Right.
And if he's interested in applying as an alternate, then they're really, I mean, since we know him, I'm not sure we'd even need an interview. We could do one if people would like to have an interview. But I think since it's somebody that we do know, it wouldn't necessarily be an interview we'd have to have, since we've interviewed him before for the library position.
So if this list stays the same and all the incumbents want to stay, then the only interviews we would need are the library and UAJA.
That's what I'm hearing. If Lewis is interested in being appointed as an alternate to either zoning hearing board or planning commission, I can reach out to him and see if he has a preference and if that's acceptable to him. And if it is, then I'll just schedule interviews for library and UAJA representatives.
Yeah.
But if Lewis wants to be applying for the main board
Core
of
board.
either,
Of either one.
then
We'd have an interview.
then we do an interview.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a clarifying question. So do we know that the alternates, the current alternates don't want to be considered for the open positions?
I don't know. No. Still waiting to hear whether Lisa or Chen. are
So,
interested
yeah,
in being
or,
appointed.
yeah, so if the current alternates, either Lisa or Chen or Stephanie Rocco, if they want to be, then again, essentially, if there are two people, then we'll interview.
Right.
And let's
Yep.
figure out the numbers and then you'll get those answers by this formula.
So what I'll try to do is hopefully if I can get a date for an interview scheduled either in 2 weeks or the third week of November or even the last week of November. I understand that Thanksgiving is on the 26th, so we want to avoid that holiday a little bit, maybe even that Tuesday, the 24th. Try to avoid December as best we can. But I'll try to get a couple hours on everybody's schedule that works in the early evening, and we'll set something up.
Yeah,
we can do that through Zoom.
And it's not quite as critical to avoid dates since we're doing it on Zoom.
Right. True.
I mean, you have more flexibility. Even if you happen to be out of town, you can still.
So if you guys want to meet on Thanksgiving.
No, I'm not sure anybody's heading out of town this year
Dave.
for Thanksgiving anyway.
I'll just throw out there before you do the doodle poll that CCMPO is currently supposed to be on the 24th that evening.
Now that would be a conflict.
And then I will be out of town on Wednesday evening.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can Zoom from the car. So that's...
Nah, we can find a different time. Zooming from the car is not fun.
Is Monday the 23rd agreeable to everybody? I know Mondays are typically
General forum.
That's COG at 7.
Yeah.
Oh, but before that.
Yeah,
it
5
do interviews though, I think. Well, unless we did in the afternoon.
I'll avoid that too. I'll try for the week of the 16th then.
Yeah, the 23rd works for me, but I'll, yeah. 16th.
Okay.
Week of the 16th is also reasonably fine.
We have the budget on the 17th.
Yeah, any day but the 17th will work for me. So, or what we have.
How about Thursday the 19th?
That works.
That would work for me.
Yeah.
All right. 6 p.m. Thursday the 19th. Okay for everybody. We have the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan meeting, and then we have Park and Rec too. So we've got a couple of committee meetings that should end at 6. So we can do.
Yeah. So if that works for all the applicants, then.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yep, that's good.
6 p.m. it is on the 19th.
You'll send a calendar invite?
I will certainly do that with the details to access, and I'll get something scheduled with the applicants. Thank you. That was easier than a doodle. Now I don't have to do a doodle poll.
Okay. Get this on my calendar here.
Yeah, I don't have anything on the budget thing that was on Tuesday. So is there a calendar invite that was sent out, or?
What's that? I'm sorry.
So for the budget thing on Tuesday, was there a calendar invite that was sent out? I don't have it on my calendar. It could be I missed it, but I'm just asking.
The budget special meetings for our budget are November 10th and 11th, next Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay.
What was on the 17th? I had something. Was that a potential?
Yeah, it's possible that was in the it might have been an option for the doodle poll,
Okay.
but yeah. So the 10th and the 11th we have the 2 special meetings
Oh, that's
scheduled.
right. We kept 3 open originally, and then narrowed it down to 2.
So the 10th and 11th I have on my calendar. Just checking. We'll
Great.
check the 17th,
Yeah.
something. But, okay. Thank you.
That's right.
Here's up.
Okay. Okay. So then the next item we have is the award of contract 2020-C15 street tree pruning.
I'll ask Dave to introduce that.
There's an award memo in your packet. Bids were open publicly for the street pruning contract on October 27th. Contract was advertised in the local newspaper, distributed to interested bidders. We had 3 plan holders, 3 bids from the following companies in the following amounts: Great Lakes Tree Service, $46,027. Cutting Edge Tree Professionals, $45,600. Venture Tree Surgeons, Inc., $23,380. Work includes trimming 982 street trees in Hunter's Chase, The Heights, Old Gatesburg Road, and Beaver Avenue. Budget for the work is $48,000. Estimate for the work, $44,190. I'm recommending the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020 C15 street tree pruning to Denture and Denture Tree Surgeons, Inc. in the amount of $23,380.
Do we have a motion?
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020 C15 street tree pruning to Denture and Denture Tree Surgeons, Inc. in accordance with their bid in the amount of $23,380.
Second, Laura.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Just had a question for Dave. We have worked with this company before, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I always a little concerned when somebody comes in half of what everybody else was, but if we've worked with them before, then
yeah, we have. We should not have the issues we ran into last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we've worked with them. They're very established. They usually bring pretty large work crew in and make short work of it, as opposed to a few guys stretching it out over the winter.
Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now we go to staff committee reports, starting with the executive
There was
committee.
a consent agenda item that was pulled if you
Oh,
want to.
yes, indeed. We do need to go back to that. Okay, that was the request for CNET sponsorship, PSU Weather Service. So, did you have any other information on that, Dave? Or?
No, not really, other than what's included in your agenda.
Yeah.
I don't have a strong position. I don't have a position on it either way. If,
yeah,
as I said, there's no real well-defined policy that the board had, because frankly, these requests don't come up very often, particularly from groups that are not affiliated with the township in some manner. I mean, we commonly sponsor programming for Spring Creek Watershed Commission that's incorporated as part of the budget. But we don't typically get requests from outside organizations or social clubs or whatever, in this case, the Campus Weather Service for CNET sponsorship. So this is kind of a new area, but you know, I didn't want to commit to anything one way or the other without getting board review, which is why I included it as a consent agenda item, figuring if there was concern, you'd pull it, which you did. And here it is. If you want to move forward with it, then you can. Otherwise, just let it sit.
Yeah, I know in the past we've had people come in and do a presentation and voted to do this. Are they requesting, what is it, 2 sponsorships over the course of the year? And is that what we've done in the past? Or
to my knowledge, we've not sponsored this particular organization for CNET broadcasting. Typically,
okay. Well, that's what actually, yeah, we have done it in the past. It's a student group, and they are required to get funding outside of the university. And what I'm trying to remember, and it doesn't specifically say in here, is whether we had sponsored for a certain number per year, or if they're rotating among municipalities and asking, you know, for 2 in this year and then not in the future. And I'm not sure what the request is. So
I have an even simpler question. What is this group and what are they doing?
They are student meteorologists, and in part of their curriculum would be to broadcast, in this case using CNET, their daily weather broadcasting. So what's outlined in the request would be daily weather broadcast every afternoon, as well as 2 weekly 15-minute shows called Whether or Not and Up in the Air, all of which would air on CNET in the Center region. The way CNET does their program, or the way CNET assigns their costs to the member municipalities are based on programming. And that programming, it may be, so if they're asking for 2 programs to be sponsored, that may be several snippets or segments of 15-minute increments or whatever it might be that cumulatively total 2 the 2 programs. So, I think it might be more than just 2 specific broadcasts. Yeah. It seems like it would be several throughout the course of the year, but the cost to the township would be equivalent of 2 programs.
Yeah, I guess my thought on this one is that we might want to get a little more information from them as to exactly what they're requesting and why. I know in the past they've come in and done a presentation, so if maybe we could have somebody give us more information the next meeting.
Yep.
Because it's not clear whether they're asking for 2 programs per year every year, or, and if you could also check, because I don't remember what a program costs, so we just have an idea of what that amounts to.
Sure.
Yeah, I think personally I don't see a great big public value in this. It's more like at least from the information I have, it sounds like more like a teaching and training thing, and so perhaps Penn State should be funding it or whoever else. And so, but this I would only consider it in sort of like our charitable giving, like we give the fireworks and the discovery space. But they occupy a space where there isn't someone else, and it does give back to our community something unique. In this case, there are lots of places where we can get news about weather. So the value is more like just like supporting a student organization to me. So I'm somewhat reluctant to support this, but I'm willing to hear what others have to say.
I'm right there with you, Prasenjit. I am supportive of education, teaching, and learning opportunities, but I don't want to put our funding, our limited, precious funding that we have in support of this. Like Steve said, it's fine if we want to get more information, but I'm probably not going to want to support this no matter what they say.
Yeah, I would be prepared to say no right now. I think those charitable funds that we have are going to be needed in a lot of different areas. And like Prasenjit said, this doesn't really fall into one of the categories that we usually seem to put that money toward. And if the object of the exercise was to fundraise for the broadcast, then this isn't really fundraising. I don't know. I think there's better ways to do it. I'm not sure what the exact assignment was. That was part of that. Somebody
it's not really intended as a fundraising, but asking municipalities to donate time on CNET, basically, as opposed to
they're supposed to come and ask municipalities,
which is actually a fundraising because we pay for that. So, but I'm perfectly open to just making a decision tonight if we don't. If we don't need to hear from them to decide no, then that's fine. I think we would have to hear from them to decide yes. I guess that's where I stand on it. So maybe ask for sort of a straw poll of are we going to say no matter what? And if that's the case, then we should just drop this one.
I would. So I wouldn't need to, unfortunately,
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, I don't think it's a great fit for us. If they were just looking for an endorsement of like having some time on CNET that they had the money for, that would be fine, but it's really the dollars that I'm having the issue with.
I agree.
Yeah, perhaps in this case, we should save our staff's time then.
Okay, then it sounds like we really don't need to have somebody come in and make a pitch and then vote no, so.
I'll get back to the requester and let her know.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move to staff and committee reports, starting with the executive committee, which I didn't go to.
I went to that, and I'm gonna follow Steve's lead and say we've already covered everything in the general forum meeting.
Yep. Then we have Joint Parks Capital and CRPRA.
That was also me. Our two main topics were the Whitehall Road Regional Park, and there was not a lot of dialogue, kind of surprisingly, or maybe not. I think perhaps some of the other municipalities are saving their big reveal for the general forum meeting. And then the other topic was the comp plan, and in particular, we talked a little bit about governance. And I think everybody is in agreement that there is a lot of work to be done in terms of that, but people are not in agreement in terms of whether it should be undertaken in a timely fashion. I've noticed that there seems to be a trend that because it's such a big thing, that we keep kicking it down the road. The authority has had several independent work sessions where they've discussed governance, but the COG elected officials have really not. And that's a concern of mine, because really we need to buy into what the authority is going to be proposing. And so far, what they've proposed is a repeat of what's been proposed in the past and shot down by the elected officials, which is like a combined body of 10 or 12 people to be the authority. And already I'm sure you can see the problems with that. Unfortunately, there are ramifications of not taking on this difficult topic, because, for example, every step we take, every decision we make is a toss-up as to which entity is going to be the authority in the effort. So the park maintenance facility that has been recently resurfacing in dialogue, despite the fact that it's currently slated for property owned by the COG and Ferguson Township, that's Whitehall Road, despite the fact that it will house an agency because the maintenance facility is also going to be the agency headquarters for COG, the park agency as proposed, despite the fact it will house COG employees, despite the fact that we fund the building and pay all the salaries, the proposal is that the authority will own that building. So that makes no sense. And it just adds to the already very convoluted governance structure. So we really need to get this worked out. Further, part of the problem that I've seen with the governance structure is so old and left over from yesteryear that the structure of the authority includes 2 votes for the State College Borough, because they used to be really the main player, the main funder. It really grew out of there. But now Ferguson certainly is at least on equivalent standing, if not more funding of all things. So when you look at that body, they do not properly represent the taxation dollars that are funding it. In addition, the State College Borough just gives their vote to the school district, which I love the school district, but they have many mills of property tax that they direct. And we should have a discussion at this point as to whether they really should have a vote, not an advisory position, an actual vote on the dollars that we are giving as municipalities from our municipal budgets for the parks. So I'll end there, but you can see there are many issues of equity, proper representation, not to mention proper structure and functioning in accordance with the incorporating documents that really need to be addressed. So, thanks.
So the follow-up quick question. So what you're saying is that the school district has a vote on the parks budget, but they don't contribute anything?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's somewhat of an anomaly to me.
Yes.
I mean, I would be fine with advice and the interests of school children and things like that in the parks and so on, but the vote perhaps should be tied to the funding.
Yes, and I will not bore you with all the details, but at one point in time, that is how it was. There was an advisory body that they sat on, and the authority they didn't sit on. And then they just smushed them together, didn't revise any documents, just gave them the vote. At the time, the elected officials did not have an issue with it. I don't know if it was even requested that they give opinion. I'm not sure if it was just an authority effort, but it kind of just slid into being. So we need to consciously look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, and I mean, I'm not saying that they cannot make good policy decisions, but what happens is, if you ask me, you know, do you want to get this Penn State school people something? You don't have to pay for it. I would say, yeah. In fact, a lot of things I've said no to today, I would say, yes, those are good things. Let's get them going. And that creates this issue if you don't have an alignment between, this. So I'll stop the
Exactly. Yep. Thank you.
Sorry, just to wrap up. So is the Parks Capital going to take this up, or where was that left?
Well, Lisa, that's another very interesting question, because technically Parks Capital really does not have purview over this issue other than as members of the general forum. It's not in our committee's charge. And that's part of the problem with the structure of COG, is that there is no committee that really has oversight over the parks as a whole. The capital committee really only looks at capital funding of regional facilities. So as chair, I've been working to get some of this dialogue out there so we can find a home that's appropriate for it. So one of the things I requested was perhaps we could have a joint work session with authority, even though, as I've said, it's not exactly in our purview. It's part of the reason why it's so difficult to get movement on this topic.
Thanks for that information and moving that forward as much as you can.
And to add one more complication, the COG does not have authority over the authority. So it becomes a...
However, the purview of the authority, as we find in the documents, does not align with what they're actually doing. So to some extent, yes. So there's a lot to be worked out there.
Yep. And it's very complex.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have climate action and adaptation. Dave?
Yeah, I did attend that. It was on October 19th. The primary focus of the discussion was about, how this standing committee would fit into the other COG committee structures. So, the Sustainability Committee or the Climate Adaptation Committee that's being proposed to, I guess, supplant the TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, is still being conceptualized. So there was some discussion around that. And of course, as you all know, municipalities are doing some of their own initiatives or undertaking some of their own initiatives relative to a greenhouse gas emission strategy and climate action and adaptation strategies. So I think they're still trying to put the framework a little bit together on how they're going to assimilate this new committee with the rest of the other and avoid the mission creep or duplicating efforts with the other COG committees that already exist, like the Facilities Committee and just some of the municipal initiatives that are taking place outside of COG. So just had some further development of that discussion. That was pretty much the main theme of the meeting.
Thanks. And
I'm sorry, I have a question about this, I think. So I read in the COG General Forum meeting that there were presentations made at some conference or something like that to educate others on how to do oh, I'm sorry, it's a power purchase agreement. It's a different thing. It's a different thing. I take it back. I take it all back.
Okay. Then we got the Spring Creek Watershed Commission.
Yes, so I don't have very much to add to what is in the agenda. Essentially, what we are trying to figure out is figure out what to do with the One Water plan. It seems like there has been quite some work done for the last 2-3 years, and people don't want to lose it. And then there was some discussion on how are we going to pay for it and how are we going to raise funds and so on and so forth. So there was not much that I can add from what essentially is in the agenda, except discussions on those topics. However, on Thursday last, I'm also part of this Pennsylvania Governor Wolf's commission on the upper middle Susquehanna Watershed Commission. I think I got the name right. So that one had some interesting discussions, and maybe Dave already knows this, but the first topic was stormwater fees and so on and so forth. So they advised me to look into Penn West, which has like $66 million or something from the government to do some projects. So I don't know, Dave, you possibly have already looked into it, but if not, or maybe that's just another reminder. Then there was discussion about climate change, the effects of it. There are lots of dams that are in disrepair, private dams that in Michigan, which there were these huge floods last year, I think, which in two places, two of the dams gave way, and they were below standard, but then the company had gone bankrupt or something. So on the other hand, there was this one municipality which had actually taken out the dams, and they did not suffer from the flooding when these torrential rains happened. So there was talk about that and how are we going to pay for it, especially when people are moving. In so municipalities will have less of a tax base, and if it's left to the small communities, then we won't be able to take care of these things. So that was one issue. They also talked about sort of the infrastructure, both physical and cyber, to put together information for the Susquehanna River so that all the communities can use it and so on and so forth. And Spring Creek Watershed Commission is sort of one of the top 4 watersheds of interest and importance to them. So that's sort of an overview of what went on in that meeting, where I think there was more substantial things passed than in this particular Spring Creek Watershed Commission meeting per se.
Okay, thank you. And then we have the manager's report.
Thank you. I'll just kind of leave my report stand as written. The one thing I'll note is that today we submitted the petition packet to the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board for the consideration of the township-wide noise exemption from the PA Liquor Code. So I will update the board as things develop on that front. If we get a public hearing date scheduled, I don't expect that will be for a couple of weeks at least until they have time to receive the petition packet and get it scheduled, but I'll keep you updated. And other than that, if there's any questions on my report or things that aren't included on my report, I can respond to them.
Don't see any questions. We'll go to the Public Works Director.
I'll touch on a few items in my report that is in your packet. So it's the time of year when we're buckling up trucks for winter operations, but at the same time, we're collecting brush and we're collecting leaves. We had a couple breakdowns, but we're working on getting the equipment up and running. But all those operations, you know, are in progress: leaf collection and brush collection. At your next meeting, you will receive a presentation on the tree canopy survey. So that's something to look forward to. And finally, just wanted to note, as you're aware, you know, work continues on the Public Works building. The new substantial completion date is January 28th. We are having some dialogues that continue with the contractor regarding their schedule and, you know, associated items, managing, you know, changes and getting the work done as soon as we can. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Any questions for Dave? Laura.
Dave, thank you. At the Pine Grove Mill Small Area Plan Advisory Committee meeting, we mentioned briefly about the possible changeover of the streetlights. Where was the example streetlights that we were supposed to look at color?
The one closest to the Naked Egg Cafe.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, on that same side of the street.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
And then we have the Planning and Zoning Director's report.
My report's included in the agenda packet. Planning Commission met October 26th. We sort of took the opportunity to review the subdivision land development review process, just given the new saldo ordinance that was adopted in November of 2019. We also reviewed the family and child care zoning ordinance amendment. They did recommend approval of that as well. Pretty much the last 2 weeks, planning and zoning staff, we all coincidentally all had virtual conferences or in-person trainings. So we were all out doing that. That's really it.
Thank you. Then we have, are there any communications to the board that should be shared? Seeing nobody jumping up with communications.
I'll share.
At least it does. Okay, I just didn't wait long enough.
Yeah, I've had continuing emails on the stormwater fee. Those have continued to come in. I had that earlier question that I asked about the fire in RR, NRA, and then I just want to point out one of the email communications that we received about the stormwater fee. I just have to say how it was from a resident. I think it came in today or yesterday. It was just so thoroughly researched, and I just want to thank residents for their time and attention to this. I was just thoroughly impressed by how much thought people have put into the communications that they've sent, and most of that I've received have been cordial and appreciative of the discussions we're having and so forth. We did get one email with probably 400 signatures that of people not in favor of the fee, and I appreciate the effort and the work that goes into getting that kind of engagement, and whatever side of the issue you're on. I just really hope that the involvement continues, not only throughout this process, but on other things that come up in discussion.
Thanks, Lisa. I also was very impressed with that same email you're talking about. However, I would say some of them, I just count the swear words in. So I may be getting not as cordial as emails as you are in some cases. Tough skin is a good thing to billed, I guess, as an elected official.
Yeah, no, I think even and I'm mentioning some of the ones that we've all gotten that just say, thanks for the ability of people to comment. It's kind of a difficult environment to participate in meetings this way. And so they're acknowledging the difficulty and, I don't know, wishing that we could be in person for all of this, but appreciating the effort.
Okay. Next, we have calendar items. I think we've sort of discussed those as we've gone along. So the final item on the agenda would be a motion to adjourn.
This is Patty. I move we adjourn so Steve can go in there and help Dave pack up the chairs.
We gotta get this stuff stacked up here.
Okay, we're adjourned.
See ya.
Bye later.